Why did I get a letter from my late mother-in-law? I couldn't believe my eyes as I stared at the envelope in my mailbox. It was from her. Even though we had just said our goodbyes at her funeral yesterday, she had always been so kind to me, like a friend despite our age gap. We used to go out and have fun together, and her sudden passing had hit me hard. I was still struggling to accept that she was gone. During my mourning, getting a letter from my mother-in-law was a big shock. As I read it quickly, I discovered something totally unexpected. She had arranged for it to be sent to me by the temple priest after she passed away. Inside, she told me about a hidden door in the family chest and how to find it. She stressed that I should open it alone. Realizing I had the house to myself, I rushed over and used the spare key to get in. Following her instructions, I found the secret compartment and managed to open it. Inside, I found something incredible. I'm Nancy, 35, working as a web designer from home. My husband Tom, 4 years older, and I tied the knot 5 years back. We were introduced by a friend, and our bond remains strong. Sadly, we haven't been able to have kids yet. It's been tough, but my mother-in-law, also named Nancy, has been a source of solace. She always reassures me, saying there's no rush and suggests fun outings like trying out the new waffle place near the station. Her warmth and encouragement have eased my worries about not having children. Though I still long for them, I've decided against aggressive fertility treatments and am letting things happen naturally. My husband Tom travels a lot for work, so my mother-in-law and I often hang out when he's away. Despite our age gap, we've become really close, almost like friends. She lives nearby with my brother-in-law's family, who have 3 kids. But while my mother-in-law gets along with them, my brother-in-law and his wife aren't so friendly towards us because we don't have kids. Nancy, still no kids. We've got 3 wonderful ones here. Not having kids is disrespectful. You should distance yourself from your mother-in-law. Amy, my brother-in-law's wife, often taunts, with Jason, my brother-in-law, joining in with mocking remarks about Tom and me. At first, my husband and I would argue back when my brother-in-law's family made those hurtful comments. But they never listened, so we started avoiding them instead. It's frustrating how they're so rude to us, but pretend to be nice around my mother-in-law. She has no idea what they're really like. We haven't told her because we don't want her to worry unnecessarily. Feeling worried, we rang the doorbell at my in-laws' house, but no one answered. So we used the spare key to get in. "Mom," my husband called out, but there was no reply. With a sinking feeling, we searched the house and found my mother-in-law collapsed in her bedroom. "Oh no," I gasped, rushing to her side while my husband called for an ambulance. My brother-in-law's family must have been out because no one else was home. The ambulance arrived quickly, but despite their efforts, my mother-in-law passed away at the hospital. It was a stroke. My husband and I were devastated by my mother-in-law's sudden passing. We cried endlessly, but there were practical matters to attend to, like arranging the funeral. We knew we couldn't dwell in sadness forever. The funeral was meant to be a family affair, with my brother-in-law taking the lead. Despite some reluctance from him, we all worked together to honor my mother-in-law's wishes. But throughout the preparations, there was a sense of unease with my brother-in-law. While he carried out his duties as the chief mourner, he seemed detached. After brief conversations with relatives, he would abruptly leave, leaving them offended. They would then glare at him as he departed. During the gathering after the funeral, my brother-in-law took the first seat and stayed put, ignoring my husband's attempts to engage him with the guests. He just sat there with his beer, and his wife did the same beside him. Meanwhile, my husband and I moved around, thanking everyone for coming and sharing memories of my mother-in-law. Seeing their parents lounging and drinking seemed to influence my brother-in-law's kids, who busied themselves with games, laughing and nudging each other. It felt more like a casual get-together than a mourning gathering. None of them seemed affected by my mother-in-law's passing, and the relatives noticed. They didn't bother talking to my brother-in-law's family and instead shared memories with my husband and me before saying goodbye. Despite the relatives' noticeable change in behavior, they carried on, ordering more beer, discussing inheritances, and even planning vacations during this solemn time. After everything my mother-in-law did for them, "It's just disrespectful," I muttered, feeling disdainful towards my brother-in-law's family. The next morning, my husband left early for some errands. As I went to check the mailbox for the newspaper, I found a letter addressed to me. Who could this be from? I wondered, surprised as I opened it and realized it was from my late mother-in-law. Why would she send me a letter? I pondered, returning to the living room to read it. Inside, I discovered something unexpected. It seemed she had arranged for the temple priest to send it to me after her passing. The letter contained instructions on opening a chest, accessing a hidden compartment, and the contact details of the family lawyer. And then, a note. Please open it alone. I carefully studied my mother-in-law's letter, admiring her strong handwriting despite her delicate frame. Taking a deep breath, I felt the weight of her words, reflecting her resilient spirit. Glancing at the clock, it read 9:30. The house should be empty now, I thought to myself as I prepared to leave. The kids would be at school, and my brother-in-law and his wife likely out on their planned outing, according to a social media post I saw earlier. Despite it being the day after our grandmother's funeral, they seemed eager for a day off using bereavement leave. If their post was accurate, the family home should be deserted. I knew I had to go now, or I might not have another chance. As I stepped into my parents-in-law's house using the spare key, a wave of sadness washed over me. The absence of my mother-in-law, always so warm and welcoming, felt heavy on my heart. Slowly, I made my way to her room. The chest, said to be her trousseau, looked old but well cared for. Following the letter's instructions, I opened it smoothly and found the hidden door at the back, just as described. Relief flooded me as I managed to open it safely. Inside, along with what the letter mentioned, I found another document. What could this be? I wondered, feeling my mother-in-law's love emanating from the papers. Tears threatened to spill, but I knew I had to leave quickly. I couldn't risk being caught there by someone returning home. After all, the letter had emphasized the importance of doing it alone. When I returned home with the documents, I reached out to the family lawyer mentioned in the letter to inform them of my mother-in-law's passing. Just as I was about to contact my husband and my brother-in-law's family to discuss gathering this weekend, an email from my sister-in-law arrived. It urged us to convene at my parents-in-law's house urgently for important news. What could she want to discuss? Despite feeling uneasy, declining seemed strange, so I accepted. That weekend, we nervously gathered at my parents-in-law's house. My brother-in-law and his wife wore smug smiles, and their children were conspicuously absent. As soon as we sat down, they presented a document, my mother-in-law's will. It bore her signature, leaving all assets to my brother-in-law and his wife. You see, we inherit everything, my brother-in-law gloated, his laughter harsh. While my husband looked stunned, I quietly excused myself and discreetly brought in the lawyer waiting outside. Who's this? My brother-in-law and his wife sounded puzzled as the lawyer entered. Even my husband, unaware of the lawyer's presence, looked surprised. This is the lawyer my mother-in-law trusted, I explained briefly. Gradually, confusion turned to anger on my brother-in-law and his wife's faces. A lawyer? Why bring them here? They demanded. It's part of my mother-in-law's instructions. She wanted the lawyer to help draft the estate division agreement smoothly, I replied. They protested loudly, insisting they didn't need legal assistance. My brother-in-law slammed the desk, gesturing to my mother-in-law's will. See, we have her will. We don't need a lawyer, he declared. The lawyer intervened calmly. Are you sure your mother wrote this entire document herself? My brother-in-law affirmed angrily, but the lawyer shook his head. This can't be recognized as a will. A holographic will must be entirely handwritten by the testator, he explained, pointing out inconsistencies in the document. The handwriting looked familiar, but the rest appeared to be printed, likely from a computer. The room fell silent as my brother-in-law reached for the will in front of him. But no matter what he did, the content remained unchanged, neatly printed in Gothic font. Huh? Suddenly, my husband pointed out something strange. Why is the back of the paper so clean? I examined it closely and noticed a discrepancy. The handwriting in the signature section was different from the rest. Could this be a forged will? My brother-in-law and his wife trembled at the lawyer's observation. We wouldn't do such a thing, they protested, but their tension was palpable. The lawyer warned, forgery of a will is a serious crime. Their faces drained of color as they stuttered through excuses. The lawyer delivered the final blow. Nancy has a notarized will, making yours invalid. My brother-in-law and his wife were shocked. What? We never heard of it, they exclaimed. But I remembered the letter from my mother-in-law, mentioning a notarized will hidden behind the chest's secret door. We were just as surprised. In the letter my mother-in-law sent earlier, she disclosed the hiding spot to us. Along with practical details, she explained her reasons for making the notarized will and why she shared it with me. She had sensed her health declining and prepared the will, suspecting that my brother-in-law and his wife might try to interfere with it. While I had thought my mother-in-law was oblivious to my brother-in-law and his wife's true nature, it seemed she had a faint inkling of their greed. The notarized will stipulated that the assets would be split equally between my brother-in-law and my husband. What? She did this? My brother-in-law and his wife were stunned, their eyes wide. Then my brother-in-law's demeanor shifted abruptly, and he exclaimed, "Ah, right? As the eldest son, I'm supposed to be the beneficiary of Mom's life insurance, aren't I?" His eyes gleamed with intensity as he spoke. I replied in a chilly tone, "In addition to the notarized will, your mother also left me the life insurance certificate, with myself as the beneficiary." Inside the hidden compartment of the chest, alongside the notarized will, was the life insurance certificate. My brother-in-law and his wife balked at the documents in disbelief, their eyes fixed on them. "I never heard about this. I had no idea," the lawyer interjected. "Changing a life insurance beneficiary doesn't always require notifying the previous one." Despite my brother-in-law's protests and table slamming, the lawyer intervened. Turning to me, my husband asked anxiously, "When did Mom entrust you with this?" "I didn't know." I reassured him with a smile. "It was all in the letter I received from her. She wanted to tell you too, but she was worried about raising suspicion with your brother and his wife if both of us were involved. So she entrusted it to me alone." "I understand. It makes sense, considering how close Mom and you were," my husband remarked. As we spoke, my sister-in-law burst in, hysterical. "I can't accept this. Why should you, who didn't even show your children to my mother-in-law, inherit her estate? This is ridiculous. I won't accept it." My brother-in-law chimed in, his face reddening with anger. "Exactly. You have no right to Mom's estate. We lived here just for her inheritance. Splitting it equally? Don't make me laugh. It's all ours." My sister-in-law continued to shout, adding to his selfish claims. "We have 3 children. As compensation for not showing my mother-in-law any grandchildren, you should give all of her inheritance to our children for their future. We have given her 3 grandchildren, so we deserve it more. The inheritance belongs to us." Despite my sister-in-law's aggressive outburst, I remained composed. "Your arguments don't make sense. Let's try to calm down," I said calmly, but it only seemed to fuel her anger further. "Your calmness is so infuriating. Just give us the money already. You're worthless without children," she shouted, launching herself at me. My husband and the lawyer stepped in to stop her, but before they could, she landed a punch on my head. "Ouch!" I cried out in pain. "Stop it." My husband and the lawyer managed to restrain her, but she continued to struggle, demanding the inheritance. Her eyes were wild and her face contorted with rage. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law encouraged her, urging her to hit me more. Enraged, my husband called the police to intervene. When the police arrived, my husband and the lawyer briefed them on the situation. My brother-in-law and his wife were escorted away. We thanked the lawyer and decided to let him go for the day. What was meant to be a discussion about dividing the estate turned into chaos. We agreed to send a gift as an apology. My husband had been worried about my well-being since the incident, but he relaxed when I assured him that my headache had gone away. Reflecting on the tumultuous events, I sighed. It's been quite intense. Then my husband brought up something unexpected. "You know, Amy always seems to boast about her children and money," he said. It was true. My sister-in-law constantly flaunted her children and showed an intense fixation on money. During the previous argument about money, my sister-in-law's fixation on her children and money became evident. Her expression during the altercation was truly frightening. "You're right. It's a bit unsettling," my husband mused, falling into silence afterward. Sensing his unease, I asked, "Is something bothering you?" "Yeah, there's something on my mind. I'm thinking of suggesting it to my brother. I believe it might be wise to have DNA tests done for their 3 children," my husband revealed, surprising me. "DNA tests?" I echoed, taken aback. "Yeah, and I'm also considering proposing a background check on Amy. Something doesn't feel right. It's just a gut feeling," he explained. Though I initially thought it might be unnecessary, my husband's intuition had proven accurate before. "All right, if that's what you think, let's discuss it with your brother later." When my husband broached the topic with my brother-in-law, he reacted with ridicule and extensive yelling. "Just because you don't have kids yourselves, don't doubt ours," he shouted. However, before leaving, he demanded materials about DNA testing from my husband. It seemed my brother-in-law had his own thoughts on the matter. The shocking truth emerged from the DNA tests conducted between my brother-in-law and his children. It was revealed that 2 out of 3 of his children did not share his blood. I had my doubts about the youngest because their features didn't resemble either of us much. But I never expected this from the middle one. My husband muttered, stunned by the revelation. My brother-in-law delved into his wife's background, and the findings were damning. It appeared that my sister-in-law had been involved with multiple men even before marrying my brother-in-law. Furthermore, her recent affairs had been exposed to the wives of her lovers, who were now seeking compensation. As my sister-in-law spent more time at home than my brother-in-law, she carefully concealed any notices, such as registered letters. Upon examining the details, it became clear that the total amount of compensation demanded far exceeded my sister-in-law's earnings or savings. Ultimately, it seemed my sister-in-law was determined to claim my mother-in-law's inheritance for herself at any cost. As events unfolded, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law escalated into a violent altercation, hurling objects and exchanging blows until blood was drawn. Disturbed by the commotion, neighbors alerted the police, leading to their arrest on charges of assault, in addition to the ongoing investigation into the forged will. Further inquiry revealed a history of theft and harassment against wealthy individuals, compounding their legal troubles. Ultimately, both ended up incarcerated. Concerns arose about the future of their 3 children, for whom we were now the closest relatives since our mother-in-law's passing. Despite considering taking them in, we hesitated. The children had been deeply influenced by their parents' toxic behavior, referring to us disdainfully as childless incompetence. Even the eldest at 14 and the youngest at 7 demonstrated a shocking lack of respect or understanding of proper conduct. Despite their parents' predicament, their attitudes remained unchanged. Hearing our 14-year-old nephew dismiss us as childless idiots was disheartening beyond words. Exposed to such hostility, we found it impossible to nurture affection or optimism about their upbringing. In the end, we decided to reach out to my sister-in-law's parents and formally cut ties with the children. It seemed they understood our decision, as our nephew bitterly remarked, "I'd rather live in Grandma's old shack with a clueless, childless couple." It was clear this was the best course for everyone involved. We chose not to disclose the fact that the younger 2 children were not biologically related to my brother-in-law. Whether to reveal the truth or not, we left in the hands of my brother-in-law and his wife's relatives. My husband and I made the decision to relocate to a distant place, using the inheritance from my mother-in-law to start anew. Our new home was surrounded by lush greenery and nature, instantly making us feel at peace. There was a quaint waffle shop nearby, where we often reminisced about my mother-in-law, wishing she could have joined us. Shortly after the move, I discovered I was pregnant, a long-awaited blessing that filled us both with overwhelming joy. The positive pregnancy test brought tears to our eyes, and later, the doctor confirmed the news, leaving us elated. We couldn't help but imagine how thrilled my mother-in-law would have been if she were still with us. In addition to the pregnancy, the entrepreneurial venture I had been quietly planning was also progressing smoothly. My husband and I worked diligently, anticipating the arrival of our child and cherishing each day filled with happiness.
Hey, my name's Naomi. Let me walk you through my little world, just so you know who you're dealing with here. I grew up with just my mom, Sarah. She was a nurse, always running off her feet to make ends meet, but somehow, she managed. We never had much, but she busted her ass to make sure I never felt it. Every evening, when she'd slump down at our kitchen table, I'd hear bits and pieces about her day, how she helped an old man walk again or comforted someone who had nobody else. It got me thinking, early on, that I wanted to be in the helping business too, just with less blood, so biology was it for me. As for my dad? Never knew him. He was out of the picture before I could even crawl, and Mom never talked much about him, except to say it was just us, and that was enough. And honestly, it was. School was my thing, especially science. I ate up anything to do with cells and genes, anything that explained a little bit of why we're here and how we tick. Made sense to me to go in that direction career-wise, so I ended up at a pharmaceutical company after college, messing around with compounds and hopefully making something useful. It wasn't all work, though. I had my share of fun, too. My best friend, Jess, made sure of that. She dragged me out to all the parties she could, saying I needed to lighten up. That's where I met Alex. "Come on, Naomi, you're gonna love this guy." Jess nudged me one night at one of her famous backyard bashes. She had this grin on her face, the kind that told me she was up to no good. "Jess, I'm not. Just talk to him. His name's Alex. Cute, funny, and as nerdy about music as you are about your science stuff." She pushed, practically shoving a drink into my hand. I remember rolling my eyes, but let's be real, I was curious. So, I let her lead me through the crowd, past the makeshift dance floor where a couple of guys were trying way too hard, to where Alex was standing, awkwardly holding a beer and looking like he wanted to be anywhere but at a party. "Hey, Alex, this is Naomi." Jess introduced us with a little too much enthusiasm. "Naomi, meet Alex, the only other person I can tolerate for more than an hour." We talked about everything that night, from the latest rock albums to the weirdest science facts. Turned out, he was into biology too, but more the corporate side of things. His dad ran a toilet paper company, which cracked me up. "A toilet paper tycoon, huh?" I teased. "Hey, everybody needs it," Alex shot back, laughing. "What about you? Saving the world one petri dish at a time?" "Something like that," I grinned. We clicked, simple as that. A year flew by with Alex. Movies, late-night talks, dinners with Jess poking fun at us for being disgustingly cute. Everything was pretty perfect, till he wanted me to meet his folks. I was game but nervous as hell about it. His dad was this big-shot business owner, and his mom stayed at home, keeping their life in order. We met at some swanky restaurant downtown that had more forks at each setting than I had drawers in my kitchen. Alex held my hand under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze as we waited for his parents to show up. "They're usually right on time," Alex muttered, checking his watch for the umpteenth time. Just as he said it, a man with a commanding air and a woman with a carefully styled bob walked in. George and Linda, the people who could potentially be my future in-laws. "Mom, Dad, this is Naomi." Alex introduced me with a proud smile. Linda offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes as she took me in, from my hair down to my shoes. George, however, gave a warm handshake, his grin genuine. "Nice to meet you, Naomi. Alex has told us a lot about you," George said, settling down beside his wife. The dinner started off well enough. We talked about mundane things, weather, the restaurant's decor, and a bit about George's toilet paper empire, which he discussed with a sort of bemused pride. Then Linda, swirling her wine glass, leaned in with a smile that felt more like a shark sizing up its next meal. "So, Naomi, Alex tells us you're a biologist. That must be interesting." "Yeah, it's pretty fascinating work. Getting to see the building blocks of life, helping develop new medicines," I replied, trying to sound both enthusiastic and humble. "And your parents must be proud. What does your father do?" Linda asked, the question dropped like a casual afterthought. The table seemed to go a bit quieter. Alex's grip on my hand tightened. I hesitated, the weight of her question sinking in. "I wouldn't know, actually. My dad left before I was born. It's just been me and my mom," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the churn in my gut. Linda's eyebrows shot up, her smile faltering. "Oh, I see. That's rather unfortunate. It's hard to know what you're getting with uncertain lineage. Not knowing if there's a history of, well, undesirable traits." My mouth felt dry. I glanced at Alex, whose jaw had tightened. "I think people are more than their genetics," I managed to say. "Of course, but you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree," Linda continued, her tone light but her words heavy. "For all we know, he could have been a drunk or worse. And being raised by a single mother, Well, it's not the ideal situation for stability, is it? George seemed uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as he tried to change the subject. Linda, why don't we? No, George, these are legitimate concerns. We're thinking about the future of our family here. Linda cut in, her gaze fixed on me like I was a problem to solve. Alex finally spoke up, his voice firm. Mom, Naomi is amazing. She's smart, kind, and the hardest worker I know. Whatever her dad was or wasn't doesn't change who she is. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of tension. I pushed food around my plate, feeling like I'd been put on trial and found wanting. When we finally left the restaurant, the relief was palpable. A whole year of mostly bliss and a little bit of family drama flew by, and there we were, sitting at my mom's cozy kitchen table, talking wedding plans. Mom was all smiles and tears, thrilled to bits about the big day. Naomi, this is going to be beautiful. I'm so proud of you, she kept saying, squeezing my hand. Just as we were picking colors and themes, Alex's phone buzzed. His face fell as soon as he saw who it was. It's my mom, he said, excusing himself to take the call in the next room. The change in his tone had my stomach tightening with nerves. I exchanged a worried look with Mom, who mouthed, "Everything okay?" Moments later, Alex came back, looking like he'd seen a ghost. My dad had an accident. He's in the hospital. We need to go, now. He rushed out the words. We grabbed our things and sped to the hospital. The drive felt like the longest of my life, each second stretching out as I imagined the worst. When we arrived, Linda was pacing the waiting area, a mess of worry. He just lost consciousness while driving. Thank God someone saw and called it in, she said, her voice cracking. He was supposed to be at a meeting. Now they're saying it's his lungs, they found a serious disease. My heart sank. What do they say needs to be done? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady for Alex's sake. He needs a part of a lung, a transplant. Linda choked out the words. They want to check if Alex could be a donor. Without hesitation, Alex spoke up. Let's do whatever tests are needed. I'm here, I'm ready. They took him away to run the preliminary tests, and Linda and I sat in an uneasy silence. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows. Finally, Alex returned, holding a sheet of paper in his hand, his brow furrowed. They've done the blood tests and stuff. Look, Naomi, this is odd, he said, handing me the results. I glanced at the paper and my eyes widened. Blood type AB. I remembered the conversation about blood types we had once, idly chatting. Alex, didn't you tell me both your parents are type A? Yeah, they are. Why? He looked puzzled. If both your parents are type A, you can't be AB. I explained slowly, the scientist in me kicking in despite the personal chaos. It's just not genetically possible. Alex's face went pale. What does that mean? I took a deep breath, not wanting to unravel this here. Let's just keep this info for now, I said, taking out my phone and snapping a photo of the results. Might need to think this through later. He nodded, confusion written all over him, but we were quickly pulled back into the current crisis as a doctor approached us. Your fiancé isn't a match, unfortunately. But we're arranging for another potential donor now. The surgery is urgent, the doctor explained briskly. We spent the next hours waiting, caught in a haze of medical updates and silent personal questions. Despite everything, my mind kept circling back to the blood type issue, but I pushed it away, focusing on being there for Alex and hoping for his dad's recovery. After the successful surgery and Alex's dad's swift recovery, we didn't want to put our lives on hold any longer. So, we decided to go ahead with our engagement party. It was supposed to be a celebration, a new beginning, but as it turned out, not everyone was on the same page. We picked this lovely restaurant overlooking the river, thinking it'd be perfect for a night of joy. I was buzzing around, making sure everything was just right, but my nerves were shot. My mom was running late because of a last-minute emergency at her clinic, which I knew was going to kick off some snide remarks. Sure enough, as the guests started filling in, Linda took her chance the moment she arrived. Dressed to the nines, she swept in with a frosty air that could chill champagne. "Starting without the mother of the bride, are we?" Linda said loudly, making sure her voice carried over to where I was checking on the seating arrangement. "Well, I suppose punctuality isn't valued in some families." "Naomi, dear, it's such a shame your mother's habits reflect so poorly on you." I clenched my jaw, forcing a smile. "She got caught up at work, Linda. You know, saving lives." "She'll be here any minute," I replied, keeping my tone light despite the heat rising in my cheeks. Linda tooted, shaking her head as she glanced around, pulling some of our relatives closer. "It's always something, isn't it? An engagement dinner is a significant event, yet it seems some people don't treat it with the respect it deserves. It's just such behavior that makes one question the upbringing, doesn't it?" I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this night wasn't about Linda or her approval. Everyone who knows us understands and respects why she might be late. "It's really not a problem for anyone here," I countered, my voice steady but firm. "Oh, but it is, Naomi. When you marry into a family, you bring your background with you. And let's be honest, dear, your background is a bit muddled, isn't it?" Linda continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "A daughter born out of wedlock, to a woman who couldn't even manage to catch a husband." The murmurs around us grew, and I saw Alex's face darken from across the room. He started to make his way over, but I raised my hand slightly, signaling him to let me handle it. "Linda, my mother has done a remarkable job raising me on her own. She's shown me the value of hard work and integrity, something we all appreciate here," I said, my voice louder now, making sure it carried the weight of my conviction. "And Alex and I are committed to each other, regardless of what anyone else thinks or says." The atmosphere was thick with tension, but I didn't want the evening to spiral into conflict. I took a deep breath, glancing around at the gathered friends and family who were here to celebrate with us. "Let's not let this delay us any further," I suggested, my voice calm but carrying. "Please, everyone, let's sit down and enjoy the evening. We're here to celebrate our engagement, something happy and full of hope." The engagement dinner was in full swing, despite the rocky start. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, laughing and chatting over plates of delicious food. I was making my rounds, ensuring all our guests felt welcomed, when the front door of the restaurant swung open. My heart leapt. It was Mom, finally here, looking a bit flustered but as beautiful as ever in her elegant dress. "Sorry I'm so late, everyone," she called out, making her way through the crowd to where we were gathered around a table with Alex's parents. I figured it was as good a time as any to formally introduce her to Alex's folks. "Mom, this is George and Linda, Alex's parents," I said, gesturing towards them with a smile. But as soon as my mom laid eyes on George, her whole demeanor changed. She let out a sharp gasp, covered her eyes with her hands, and staggered back a step. It was like she'd seen a ghost. "Mom? What's wrong?" I rushed to her side, completely bewildered. She was pale, shaking her head as if to dispel a nightmare. George, too, looked like he'd been struck, his face draining of color, his eyes fixed on the floor. "This can't be happening," my mom murmured, her voice barely audible. "We can't, this wedding can't go on." Confused and starting to panic, I pressed, "Mom, what are you talking about? What's going on?" She finally looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Naomi, this is too much. George is your father. We can't do this." The room fell silent instantly, the earlier noise dying down as if sucked away. Murmurs began to ripple through the crowd, everyone trying to grasp what they had just heard. Linda, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "George, what is she talking about? What is this nonsense?" George couldn't meet her eyes. He just stared at the ground, his voice a tortured whisper. "It's true, Linda. I was with Sarah before you. When she told me she was pregnant, I wasn't ready. I left her. I never knew. I never thought. Alex, who had been standing by my side, looked like he was going to crumble right there. Dad? You mean? Naomi and I are. He couldn't even finish the sentence, his face crumpling in despair. I felt numb, the shock too big to process. My fiancé, the man I loved, was my half-brother. It was like a twisted nightmare, except I was wide awake. Can't be together? Alex managed to choke out, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I didn't know what to say, what to feel. Everything was collapsing around us. Our future, our plans, the life we'd imagined together, all tainted by a secret that should have come out decades ago. After the bombshell about my dad, the room felt like a pressure cooker about to blow. Confusion and shock were written on everyone's faces. That's when I remembered something crucial, those blood test results from before Alex's dad's surgery. I needed to make sense of everything, not just for me, but for everyone caught in this mess. Can everyone just stop for a moment? My voice cut through the murmurs, louder than I expected. All eyes turned to me. Linda, I said, looking directly at Alex's mom. I have to ask, why do you and Alex have different blood types? What's going on there? Linda's face went pale, her eyes darting around, looking for an out. She opened her mouth, then closed it, the words failing her as her husband turned to her, his expression hardening. Tell me the truth, Linda. Now. George's voice boomed across the room, his patience worn thin. She stumbled over her words, trying to grasp at any explanation that could save face. It's a misunderstanding, that's all. Naomi is trying to make a scandal where there isn't one. But just as she tried to deflect, her sister, who'd been silent until now, stood up. Her face was set, resolved, like she'd been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. No, Linda. I can't do this anymore. I won't cover for you, she said, her voice steady and carrying across the room. Linda was already pregnant when she married George. He isn't Alex's father. She lied to keep her secret. The room erupted into gasps and whispers, the guests turning to one another, their expressions a mix of disbelief and dismay. Linda tried to speak, tried to salvage her crumbling facade, but the truth was out, and it hit harder than anything else she could say. Is this true? George's voice cracked, the pain evident. Linda's silence was answer enough. Alex looked from his mother to his uncle, then back to me. The hurt in his eyes was almost too much to bear. Mom, how could you? His voice was a whisper, a plea for something, anything that might make sense of the chaos. Linda's facade finally crumbled, her defense weak and feeble. I thought it was best at the time. To protect everyone, she murmured, but her words fell flat, lost in the shock of her deceit. The room was thick with tension, everyone processing the revelations that had turned the night upside down. No one seemed to take Linda's side, the sympathy was with me, my mom, and strangely enough, with George, who'd been lied to just as much as anyone. As the evening wound down, the guests slowly began to leave, their whispers and looks of sympathy trailing behind them. Alex stayed by my side, his earlier joy replaced by a somber quiet. We'll figure this out, Naomi, he said finally, squeezing my hand. We're not alone in this. We have each other. Yeah, I managed to say, the weight of his words, both a comfort and a reminder of the complicated path ahead. Together, whatever that means now. The days following the engagement dinner felt like walking through a fog. Alex and I had decided to take some time to ourselves, to process everything. We weren't breaking up, but we couldn't pretend our relationship could go on the same either. It was one of those tough decisions that neither of us wanted but both knew was necessary. A week later, I met up with my mom and George at a quiet coffee shop. It was the first time we were talking since the big revelation. The air was thick with awkwardness as we sat down. George looked older, the lines on his face deeper, weighed down by guilt. I'm sorry, Naomi. I can't say it enough. If I'd known, if I'd just faced up to what I did back then, George's voice trailed off, his eyes not meeting mine. "Yeah, well, you didn't. And here we are," I replied, not ready to offer forgiveness yet. "You missed my whole life, and now things are a mess." "I know, and I'm here to make whatever amends I can," George said earnestly. "I've missed so much, and I regret that deeply. I want to be part of your life now, if you'll let me." I looked at my mom, who had been quietly sipping her coffee. "Mom, what do you think? Can we even start to fix this?" She set her cup down, her voice steady. "I've had a lot of years to think about what happened. I was angry, so angry at George, for a long time. But holding on to that hasn't helped me, or you. If George is sincere, and I believe he is, maybe it's time we tried to move forward." Moving forward sounded good in theory, but it was hard to know where to start. "Okay, let's say we try this. What does moving forward even look like?" I asked, genuinely unsure. George leaned forward, his expression serious. "For starters, I want to be there for you, however you need. And not just with words. Financially, emotionally, whatever gaps I can fill." It felt weird, considering letting George in after everything. But Mom seemed to think it was worth trying, and I trusted her more than anyone. "And what about Linda and Alex?" I had to ask, the question hanging over us. George's face clouded over. "Linda and I are figuring things out. As for Alex, he's heartbroken, Naomi. He loves you. He wants to stay in your life, if you'll have him." My heart ached at the mention of Alex. I don't know how to be around him and not feel everything I felt before. But I don't want to lose him either. "It's going to take some time." "Take all the time you need," George assured. "We'll go at whatever pace you set." After everything that happened, the dust finally settled, and the biggest surprise was that Alex and I found our way back to each other. Despite the unbelievable twists our lives had taken, our love proved resilient. We realized that no matter what, we couldn't imagine our lives apart. Eventually, we celebrated our wedding, surrounded by those who supported us through thick and thin, and it was genuinely the happiest day of my life. Life went on, and as for Alex's parents, they ended up divorcing. George, feeling betrayed by years of deception, left Linda without alimony or a share in the joint property. He was hurt deeply but decided to channel his efforts into something positive by transferring all his property and business to Alex and me. Running the business has been a challenge, but Alex handles it like he was born for it, and I've never been prouder of him. Things between George and my mom, Sarah, are still tense. Mom never fully forgave him for leaving her all those years ago, and their interactions are mostly cordial and only for the sake of family harmony. It's not perfect, but they manage for our sakes. As for Linda, after the divorce, she moved to another city. We don't hear much from her, and she wasn't invited to the wedding. Honestly, neither Alex nor I want to rekindle that connection. It's better for everyone this way. Sitting in our backyard, Alex and I often talk about how our journey together has been anything but ordinary. Remember when we thought planning a wedding was going to be our biggest challenge? I joked one evening, sipping on my tea as the sun set beautifully in front of us. Alex laughed, wrapping an arm around me. "Yeah, life threw us some curveballs, didn't it? But look at us now." "Yeah, stronger than ever," I agreed, leaning into him. I wouldn't change a thing about our story. We've come to understand that life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. We've faced challenges that would have broken many, but here we are, living proof that what doesn't kill you really does make you stronger. Our story isn't just about the struggles, but also about overcoming them, about love finding a way, and about building a future together no matter what. I guess you could say I was always the other one. Not the first choice, not the one in the spotlight. That was Anna, my older sister. Everything from the start just came her way, attention, gifts, you name it. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how I grew up. We lived in a decent enough house. Dad worked as a mechanic and Mom was a part-time cashier. They weren't rolling in money, but somehow, there was always enough for Anna. Me? I got the leftovers. One cold December evening, which pretty much set the tone for my childhood, we were sitting around the small dinner table. Anna was going on about some school project she aced. "Mom, Dad, my teacher said it was the best in the class." Anna beamed, her eyes lighting up in a way that made my parents practically glow with pride. "That's my girl. We knew those science kits were worth every penny," Dad said, his voice full of nothing but pride. Mom nodded. "We'll get you whatever you need, honey. You just keep up the good work." I poked at my food, feeling the familiar knot in my stomach. "Hey, I got an A on my math test," I mumbled, not sure why I bothered. "That's nice, Emily," Mom said, barely glancing my way. "Make sure you keep it up." No praise, no excitement. It was like scoring well was expected of me, or worse, like it didn't even matter. I learned early on not to expect much. Christmas was a few weeks away, and the disparity in our living room was almost laughable. Under the tree, beautifully wrapped gifts piled up, all for Anna. I knew the routine. My gifts were usually things like socks or a book, nothing that screamed special. That year, it wasn't any different. Anna ripped through her presents with glee, uncovering new clothes, gadgets, and even a brand new laptop. "Oh my God, this is awesome. Thanks, Mom and Dad," she squealed. I unwrapped my own, a second-hand novel and a pack of plain shirts. "Thanks," I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. When the holidays were over, things went back to the usual routine. Anna was the star, and I was just there. Aunt Sarah was the only one who seemed to notice. She'd drop by now and then, always with a small gift just for me, something that made me feel seen. But those visits stopped after one particularly ugly argument. I was coming home from school when I overheard them in the kitchen. "You can't keep doing this, John. You're ignoring your younger daughter," Aunt Sarah said, her voice stern and full of frustration. "Sarah, she doesn't need as much as Anna," Dad fired back, his tone harsh. "That's not the point. It's about showing both your daughters that you care." "Well, maybe if Emily was more like her sister, it wouldn't be so hard," Dad retorted, not realizing I was listening. Aunt Sarah saw me first, her face dropping as she caught my eye. I ran up to my room, before I heard any more, the sting of tears hot on my cheeks. After that, Aunt Sarah wasn't allowed over anymore. Dad said she was causing trouble, stirring up drama that didn't exist. But it did exist, I lived it every day. After high school, it was like standing at the edge of a cliff. Anna was off to college with a fat check from Mom and Dad to cover her dorm, books, everything. Me? I got a pat on the back and a "good luck, Emily." I moved out not long after that. There was no drama, no teary goodbyes. Just me, packing my few things into old boxes and suitcases, while Mom watched, her face unreadable. I found a small apartment on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The place was shared with two other girls, Lisa and Jen, who were about as broke as I was, but with dreams just as big. "Welcome to the dungeon," Lisa joked on the day I moved in, showing me around the cramped space with a laugh. "We make it work, though. You got a job lined up?" "Starting at the diner tomorrow," I replied, dumping a box on the bed that would be mine. "And maybe something at the bookstore, part-time." "Good hustle," Jen nodded, her eyes approving. "We all pitch in for rent on the 1st. No exceptions, okay?" "Got it," I assured her, already calculating my hours and expenses in my head. Working 2 jobs wasn't easy. The diner had me on my feet all day, taking orders, dodging the grumpy chef's temper, and smiling through it all. Nights or evenings I spent at the bookstore, shelving books and ringing up sales, the calm a stark contrast to the diner's chaos. Months turned into a year, and saving up for college seemed like chasing a mirage. Just when I'd have a little put aside, something came up. Like the time I got sick. It hit me out of nowhere. One day I was fine, the next, I was burning up, barely able to get out of bed. Lisa found me like that, shivering under a pile of blankets. Jesus, Em, you look like hell, she exclaimed, her face creased with concern. You need a doctor. I can't afford a doctor, I muttered, feeling the room spin a little. We'll figure it out, she insisted, pulling out her phone. There's a clinic, they charge based on what you earn. Don't be stubborn about this. The clinic was a crowded, weary place where the wait times could break you if the illness didn't. When my turn finally came, the doctor was a kind, tired-looking man who prescribed some meds and plenty of rest. You need to take it easy, he advised, handing me a prescription. Can you take some time off work? I almost laughed. Not really, but I'll see what I can do. Back at the apartment, I crunched the numbers. Meds, missed shifts, just scraping by on rent, it all added up too fast. My college fund, the little there was, dwindled to nothing. After the medical ordeal and draining my savings, I knew I had to face it, I needed help. Swallowing my pride, I decided to call home. It had been a while since we talked, not properly since I moved out. The phone rang, and I braced myself. Mom? It's Emily. Emily, this is unexpected. Everything okay? Her voice was cautious, not warm or worried. I need to ask a favor. Can I come home for a bit? Just till I get back on my feet? My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. There was a pause, the kind that tells you the answer won't be what you want to hear. Oh, Emily, you know your sister just moved back in with her husband. They're using your old room. There's really no space. My heart sank, but I pushed on. Can't we figure something out? Maybe I could sleep on the couch? It's just for a little while. There was another long pause. I'm sorry, Emily. It's just not possible right now. Maybe when things settle down with Anna and the baby. I hung up and sat there, the silence of the apartment pressing down on me. They had made their choice, and I wasn't it. I was on my own, truly on my own. The next few days were a blur of applying for any job I could find, skipping meals to save a few bucks, and trying not to think about the fact that my own family had turned me away when I needed them the most. It was during one of my late-night job searches that I got a call from Aunt Sarah. Emily, sweetheart, I heard about what happened. Are you okay? Her voice was like a lifeline. Hey, Aunt Sarah. I'm managing. Just trying to figure things out. Listen, why don't you come stay with me for a while? You shouldn't be alone through this. I felt tears prick at my eyes, relief washing over me. Really? Are you sure? I don't want to impose. Of course, I'm sure. You're not imposing. Your family, more than just when it's convenient. Pack your things, and come over. We'll sort the rest out together. Thank you, Aunt Sarah. Thank you so much, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Packing up my things again, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the rejection, but also the warmth of being welcomed without conditions. Aunt Sarah's place wasn't big, but it was filled with love, something that had been sorely missing for too long. When I arrived, Aunt Sarah was waiting at the door. She wrapped me in a big hug as soon as I stepped out of the cab. You're home now, Emily. Let's not worry about anything else tonight, she said, ushering me inside. Life at Aunt Sarah's was different from anything I'd known. It was quiet, peaceful, and, most importantly, I felt wanted. A few days after I moved in, Aunt Sarah and I sat down at her old, scarred kitchen table for some real talk. The morning sun spilled over the cluttered surface, turning the steam from our coffee cups into golden swirls. So, Emily, what's the plan? Aunt Sarah asked, her eyes locking onto mine with that direct, no-nonsense way she had. I took a deep breath, stirring my coffee slowly. Honestly, Aunt Sarah, I want to go to college. I want to be a lawyer. But everything's just messed up right now. She nodded, tapping a finger on the table, thoughtful. Lawyer, huh? That's a big dream, Emily. Big dreams are good. They keep us going. But they need big plans. What's stopping you? Money, I said flatly. Money is stopping me. And I've been working jobs, but it's never enough, especially not for law school. Aunt Sarah leaned back, her chair creaking slightly under the shift. I might have a solution for that. But it comes with a condition. I frowned, curious and a bit wary. What kind of condition? You get into college, and I'll pay for it. But, Emily, you've got to commit. No half measures. You work your tail off, you study hard, and you pass everything. Not just pass, excel. Can you do that? Her offer floored me. It was more than I could have hoped for. Yes, I can do that. I will, Aunt Sarah. Thank you. With that, we started planning. I applied to colleges that offered good law programs, crafting application letters late into the night. When the acceptance letter from a well-respected state college came, I actually pinched myself, thinking I was dreaming. I did it, Aunt Sarah. I got in. College was tough. Law school even tougher. Aunt Sarah's financial support freed me from the constant stress of money, but it put another kind of pressure on me. The pressure to succeed, not just for myself, but for her too. As semesters passed, I not only met Aunt Sarah's expectations, I exceeded them. My grades were top of the class, and I landed an internship at a local law firm. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the firm, I came home to find Aunt Sarah in the kitchen, her expression more serious than usual. Sit down, Emily. We need to talk. Worry pricked at my heart as I took a seat, noticing she wasn't her usual self. What's wrong, Aunt Sarah? She sighed, a long, heavy sound. Nothing's wrong, exactly. I just want you to know how proud I am of you. You've done more than I ever expected. You're going to be a great lawyer. Her praise warmed me, but her tone hinted at something unsaid. Thanks, Aunt Sarah. I couldn't have done it without you. That's not just it, she continued, her eyes serious. You've got to start thinking about what comes next. You're about to fly, and I'm just glad I could give you the wings. During my final year of law school, I managed to secure a prestigious internship at a respected law firm downtown. The first day, I walked into the towering building feeling like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My supervisor, a sharp-tongued lawyer named Mr. Coleman, met me at his office door with a skeptical look. So, you're the intern I've heard so much about. Emily, right? Mr. Coleman's voice was gruff, his eyes scanning me like I was a case file he wasn't sure about. Yes, sir. I'm here to learn and contribute as much as I can, I replied, my voice steady, despite the butterflies dancing in my stomach. The work was intense. I spent days buried in legal research, drafting documents, and sometimes, I was allowed to sit in on client meetings, observing the real dance of law. Mr. Coleman didn't hand out praise easily, but when he did, it stuck. One late evening, after everyone else had gone home, I was still at my desk poring over a particularly tough case when Mr. Coleman walked by. He stopped, looking over my shoulder at the piles of legal journals and notes spread out in front of me. Don't you ever go home, Emily? He asked, an eyebrow raised in amusement or maybe respect, I couldn't tell which. Not until I figure this out, I answered without looking up. This case could set a precedent, and I think there's an angle we've missed. Mr. Coleman grunted, pulling up a chair. Show me. We spent the next hour discussing the case, back and forth, with me arguing my point based on a precedent I found that could help our client. Finally, he leaned back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Not bad, Emily. Not bad at all. You've got a sharp mind for this. Keep it up, and you'll make a fine lawyer. The day I graduated, I felt a mix of pride and nostalgia. Aunt Sarah was in the front row, clapping louder than anyone else, her eyes shining with tears. After the ceremony, as we walked out of the auditorium, she hugged me tight. You've done it, Emily. All those years of hard work, and here you are, she said, pulling back to look at me with that proud, unwavering support that had become my rock. I couldn't have done it without you, Aunt Sarah. You believed in me when no one else did, not even myself. I said, my own eyes misty. With law degree in hand, I started applying for jobs. The market was competitive, brutal even, but I was not deterred. I sent out dozens of applications, went on several nerve-wracking interviews, and finally, I got a call that would start the next chapter of my life. Ms. Emily, this is Jared from Mason and Associates. I'm pleased to inform you that we'd like to offer you the position. Your internship performance was highly recommended by Mr. Coleman, and we believe you'd be a great fit. I almost dropped the phone. Thank you, Jared. I'd be honored to accept. When Aunt Sarah told me my sister Anna had never graduated college due to her early pregnancy and quick marriage, I wasn't really surprised. Aunt Sarah's health took a turn for the worse not long after that revelation. I was at work, buried in files, when I got the call from the hospital. My world stopped. I barely remember grabbing my things and rushing out. Everything after that was a blur until I reached her side. She was weak, her voice barely a whisper, but her eyes were the same, sharp and knowing. Emily, she murmured as I took her hand, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I'm here, Aunt Sarah. I'm right here, I managed to say, my voice trembling. She squeezed my hand, her grip frail, but firm. You did good, kid. I'm so proud of you. You remember what I always told you? To be strong. To stand up for myself, I replied, the tears I had been holding back now streaming down my face. That's right. And you have, she said, her voice growing fainter. I've left you something. In my will. The house, it's yours now. I nodded, unable to speak, squeezing her hand. We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. Later that night, she passed away quietly in her sleep. The months following her death were a blur of legal matters and settling into the house that was now legally mine. I transformed it into something that felt like a real home for the first time in my life. Then, out of the blue, my parents and Anna with her husband and kids decided to visit. I should have known they weren't just coming to check on how I was holding up. As soon as Anna walked in, she started inspecting the place like she was at an open house, commenting on every piece of furniture and layout. Oh, this would be perfect for the kids, she said loudly. Look at all this space, Mom. Her husband nodded, adding, yeah, we could really spread out here. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my cool. It wasn't until my mother chimed in that I lost it. Emily, you should really think about letting Anna have the house. They need the space, what with the kids and all. You can manage fine in a smaller place, can't you? I stared at them, disbelief turning quickly into anger. Are you serious? This is my house. Aunt Sarah left it to me, not to Anna. I'm not going anywhere. Anna, who had been pretty quiet, finally piped up, her voice dripping with entitlement. But you don't need all this space, Emily. It's just you here. We're a family of 5. It just makes sense for us to have it. That's when I laughed. It wasn't because anything was funny, but because the sheer audacity of their request was absurd. You think just because you have kids and a husband, I have to give up my home? That's not how this works. Mom looked shocked. Emily, don't be greedy. Think of the family. Family? I scoffed, the word bitter in my mouth. Where was this family when I needed a place to stay? When I needed help? They didn't have an answer to that. Look, I said, my voice firm as I stood up taller, I appreciate you all coming here, but this house is mine. Aunt Sarah wanted me to have it, and I'm going to honor her wish. You need to leave now. Anna's husband tried to argue, his face turning red, but I didn't let him get far. Out. All of you, now. Or I'll call the police. They muttered about me being ungrateful and greedy as they gathered their things. Anna shot me a look that could freeze lava, her disappointment clear. But as they left, the weight on my shoulders lifted. I had stood up for myself, for my home, and for Aunt Sarah's memory. I came home from work to the most absurd situation. I couldn't get into my own house, the locks had been changed. Before I could process what was happening, I heard noises inside and started banging on the door. It swung open and there stood my sister Anna, with her husband and their kids scattered behind her. "We've decided to move in here," she declared with a smug look, as if it was the most natural decision in the world. "What are you talking about? This is my house," I snapped, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. Anna shrugged, unbothered. "Well, we need it more than you do. We've already moved everything in." "That's not how any of this works, Anna. I'm calling the police," I said, fumbling for my phone. She laughed, clearly thinking I was bluffing. "Sure, go ahead." I dialed 911. While we waited, our parents showed up, drawn by the commotion. They sided with Anna, of course. "Emily, why are you being so difficult? This is family, we should stick together," Mom said, her voice high-pitched and nervous. "Dad, tell her," Anna added, turning to our father, who just frowned at me. "This is just plain wrong, and you know it," I shot back, the reality of the situation making my hands shake with rage. Anna's husband, who'd been silent until then, stepped up. "Just drop it, Emily. Otherwise, you'll regret it," he sneered, his tone menacing. I started recording on my phone, aiming it at him. "Threaten me again, and it's on record." He lunged for the phone, but I sidestepped him. Right then, the police arrived. It didn't take long for them to assess the situation. My sister was crying now, her kids confused and scared. Anna's husband kept saying, "It's just a family matter," trying to downplay his earlier aggression. Mom was sobbing by now, pleading with the officers. "Please, they're just kids, they don't understand. We're her family." I took a deep breath before I explained to the police. They broke in and changed the locks. I didn't give them permission. "This is my house." The officers were firm. "Breaking into a house and changing the locks is illegal, even if you are family," one of them told Anna and her husband. Finally realizing the seriousness of the situation, my family's bluster faded. The police made it clear they had to leave. Reluctantly, and with plenty of resentful glances thrown my way, they gathered their things. After the police left, I called a locksmith to change the locks again, this time making sure no one else had the keys. As I stood in the doorway of my reclaimed space, the silence was heavy, filled with the echoes of the confrontation. It was a few months later when I met Mike. He was a friend of a friend, introduced to me at a small gathering. Mike was easy to talk to, with a straightforward way about him that I appreciated. "So, you've had quite the year, huh?" Mike said, handing me a drink with a knowing smile. "You could say that," I replied, the corner of my mouth tilting up in a half-smile. "It's been eventful." As the evening went on, we talked about everything and nothing, music, books, our shared disdain for soggy French fries. It was refreshing, talking to someone who didn't see me as the overlooked sister, or the woman who kicked her family out. Weeks turned into months, and Mike started coming around more often. One quiet evening, as we sat watching a movie with a bowl of popcorn between us, Mike turned to me. "Emily, I've been thinking," he began, pausing the movie. "Yeah?" I responded, my heart skipping a beat. "I really like what we have. I mean, I know your house is your sanctuary, but I was wondering if you'd be okay with me being a more permanent part of it," he asked, his voice tentative. I looked at him, really looked, and saw everything I needed in his sincere, hopeful gaze. "I'd like that," I said simply, and his smile lit up the room. Life didn't become perfect overnight, but it felt a whole lot lighter with Mike by my side. We faced a few more challenges, like when Anna tried to stir up trouble again by spreading rumors about me being heartless. But this time I didn't face it alone. "Let them talk," Mike said one evening after I got a frustrating call from Mom, telling me how upset Anna was. "The people who know you, really know you, they know the truth. That's all that matters." He was right, and slowly, I began to let go of the anger and resentment. It wasn't worth holding on to. Instead, I focused on the good, the home I was building, both the physical walls around me and the emotional barriers I was letting down. It was just another Friday night, and there I was, sprawled on my couch, buried under a pile of investment portfolios that needed reviewing by Monday. My phone buzzed insistently on the coffee table, breaking my concentration for the umpteenth time that evening. The screen lit up with a message from Jess, my best friend since college and a perpetual source of chaos in my otherwise orderly life. "Ella, you better not be working tonight. We've got plans, remember?" Jess's text read, a hint of a threat underlying her playful tone. I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose, before typing a reluctant reply. "I remember, Jess. Just let me finish this last section." "Where are you dragging me to again?" "Quit your grumbling. It's that new Quest game downtown. It's gonna be epic. Plus, you need a break. Work can wait." She responded almost immediately, her impatience palpable even through text. I met Jess and the rest of the gang at the lobby of Mystery Manor, a place that looked more like a haunted house than a fun night out. The game host briefed us on the rules and the backstory of our adventure. We were to solve a series of puzzles to escape the manor, and our group was not the only one participating that night. As we were divided into teams, I found myself paired with a guy named Tom. He was from another company, a fact I only gleaned because his work badge was still clipped to his jeans. Tom seemed just as out of place as I felt, his hands tucked awkwardly into his pockets as he offered me a shy smile. "So, not really your scene either?" I ventured, trying to break the ice as we approached our first clue. Tom chuckled, his smile reaching his eyes. "You could say that. I got roped into this by my sister. She thinks I need to get out more." "Sounds like we're in the same boat. My friend thinks this will cure my workaholism," I replied, rolling my eyes. We spent the next hour navigating through cobwebbed corridors and solving riddles that designed to confuse rather than enlighten. Tom proved to be surprisingly insightful, his quiet demeanor belying a sharp wit that caught me off guard more than once. "You're pretty good at this," I noted as he unlocked a particularly tricky cipher that had stumped me. He shrugged, a small grin tugging at his lips. "I like puzzles. Keeps the mind sharp. How about you? What's your excuse for being so quick with these clues?" "Just a lot of practice with problem solving at work, I guess. Investment decisions aren't so different from puzzles, just with higher stakes," I explained, warming up to him as we delved deeper into the game. As we cracked the last code and escaped the manor, Tom turned to me, his eyes bright with excitement. "That was actually fun. Thanks for being such a great team partner, Ella." "No, thank you. I was dreading tonight, but this turned out to be a blast," I admitted, feeling a strange reluctance at the night coming to an end. We exchanged numbers, a move that surprised me more than it probably should have. As I watched Tom disappear into the night, a part of me hoped this wouldn't be the last I saw of him. After that quirky night at the escape room, things with Tom picked up speed faster than I ever expected. We started seeing each other regularly, finding comfort in our shared love for dry humor and disdain for unnecessary social gatherings. When I first met Tom's family, I was nervous, wondering if they'd accept me. His parents were instantly welcoming, warm smiles and hearty hugs making me feel right at home. But Karen, Tom's older sister, was another story entirely. Right from the start, she sized me up with a look that could chill a glass of beer. "So you're the one Tom's been all crazy about," she said with a sneer, her tone dripping with something less than enthusiasm. Life after marriage felt like stepping onto a fast-moving train. Just a few months in, and we were already on to our next big adventure, pregnancy. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. Holding down a demanding job while growing a human inside me? Yeah, it sounded like a plot for disaster. But Tom was a rock, always there with his unshakable calm. "Hey, you're going to be an amazing mom," Tom reassured me one evening as we sat on our couch, my feet in his lap after a particularly rough day. "And don't worry about work. We'll figure it out together." "Yeah, I know, but you've seen me with plants, Tom. They barely survive a week," I quipped, trying to mask my anxiety with humor. The pregnancy wasn't kind to me. Every morning was a battle against nausea. I remember one meeting where I had to excuse myself every half hour, rushing to the restroom while my colleagues waited patiently. The day of the delivery was a blur of pain and panic. I clung to Tom's hand, the only anchor I had as the waves of contractions tried to pull me under. The doctors buzzed around, their faces tense as they monitored the situation. It wasn't going well. "Mrs. Carter, we need to do an emergency C-section. It's the best chance for your baby," the lead doctor finally said, looking me straight in the eye as if willing me to understand the gravity of the situation. I barely nodded, my body racked with another painful contraction, as they wheeled me into the operating room. The last thing I remember was Tom's voice, soft and steady, telling me he loved me. When I woke up, the room was silent. The kind of silence that suffocates. Tom was there, his face pale and strained. He took my hand, tears brimming in his eyes, but not falling. "Ella, I'm so sorry. We lost him." The world stopped. No, that's not quite right. It shattered, a million pieces of me scattering to the wind. Our baby boy, the little life we had dreamed of and prepared for, gone before he even had a chance to cry, to see the world, to know how much he was loved. The doctors were kind but firm. "You won't be able to conceive again," they told us after a battery of tests. It was clinical, the finality of it, but nothing about that moment felt clinical to me. It felt like another loss, a future stolen from us. Tom and I went home, to a house filled with unopened baby gifts and a nursery that would remain empty. 5 years have passed since then. Tom's mom had passed away last year, and the old man was getting more and more withdrawn, spending days by himself in that big, echoing house. Tom and I had a long talk over some seriously strong coffee one Saturday morning. "We can't just leave him like this, Ella. It's not right," Tom said, running his hands through his hair, looking all worn and worried. I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee, feeling it bitter and hot down my throat. "I know, babe. It makes sense. Let's move in for a while, help him out. It'll be good, being together." Tom gave me this grateful look, like I'd just lifted 100 pounds off his shoulders. So, we packed up our stuff, not much, and by the following weekend, we were setting up in his dad's guest rooms. The first evening we moved in, the air was cool and the house smelled like lavender and old books. We were just about to have dinner, the three of us, when there was a loud banging on the door. It was Karen, of course, coming in with her usual flair for drama, her 2 kids trailing behind her like lost puppies. "What's this all about then? Moving in on Dad, now that Mom's gone?" she snapped as soon as she stepped in, not even a hello. She dropped her purse loudly on the table, her eyes darting around like she was looking for hidden treasure. "Karen, calm down. We're just trying to help Dad, not take over," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. It was hard, though, with her staring me down like I'd stolen something. Tom's dad shuffled into the room, his face lighting up seeing the kids. "Karen, let it be. They're here to help, and I'm glad for it. Sit down, have some dinner." She huffed, plopping down at the table, still eyeing me suspiciously. "Just seems mighty convenient, that's all. Mom's barely cold and here you are." Dinner was tense after that. I tried making small talk, asking the kids about school, but Karen kept drumming her fingers on the table, her eyes sharp and calculating. After we ate, she pulled Tom aside, whispering fiercely enough that I caught snatches of it. "Not right, taking advantage, always the saint, aren't you?" Tom's reply was too low for me to hear, but from the set of his jaw, I knew he was holding back a storm. When they finished, Karen grabbed her kids and stormed out, not even a goodbye to her dad. Later, cleaning up the dishes, Tom's dad put his hand on my shoulder. "Don't mind her, Ella. She's always been fiery. You're doing a good thing here." I smiled, wiping down the counter. "Thanks, Dad. It means a lot, hearing that from you." Despite the tension with Karen, life at Tom's dad's house settled into a routine. I kept up with my job, the days long but fulfilling. Evenings and weekends were our time to breathe a bit, with Tom, his dad, and me trying to make the best out of our days together. His dad, recovering from his grief and loneliness, seemed genuinely thankful for our company. He started treating me like a daughter than a daughter-in-law, always making sure I felt welcomed and valued. "Thank you, Ella, for everything. This house felt too big and too empty without your laughter," he'd tell me as we'd sit down to dinner, a simple meal brightened by the warmth of family. But while one relationship grew stronger, another spiraled further into cold hostility. Karen's attitude towards me shifted from mere disdain to outright hostility. Whenever we were alone, without Tom or his dad around, she'd unleash her bitterness. One afternoon, I was tidying up the living room when Karen dropped by. As usual, her entrance was quiet, almost stealthy, knowing that her father and Tom were out. "Ella, still playing the dutiful wife and daughter-in-law, I see," she sneered as she walked in, her eyes scanning the room like she might find something amiss. I straightened up, facing her. "Karen, I'm not playing at anything. I'm here because I care." Karen laughed, a harsh sound that echoed a bit too sharply against the walls. "Care? Or are you just securing your future here, since you can't have your own family?" The words stung, more than I wanted to admit. "That's a low blow, Karen. Why do you have to make it personal?" "Because it is personal, Ella. You're here, playing house, while knowing you'll never continue the family line. My kids are the real heirs. You're just occupying space." I took a deep breath, clenching my fists to keep calm. "Karen, I'm here because your father and Tom need me. We're family now, whether you like it or not." She scoffed, stepping closer. "Family? You think just because you married my brother and moved in here, you're family? You'll never really be one of us." Before I could respond, she turned on her heel and left, her words hanging heavy in the air. Later that evening, when Tom and his dad came back, Karen transformed like she always did. Smiling, engaging, and utterly flawless in her role as the devoted daughter. It was as if our earlier confrontation had never happened. At dinner, she talked animatedly about her children's school activities, weaving herself back into the fabric of the family with practiced ease. I watched her, marveling at the stark difference in her demeanor. Tom, catching my eye, gave me a small, knowing look. He squeezed my hand under the table, a silent message of solidarity. After dinner, while washing up, Tom leaned in. "I saw that look during dinner. Did something happen with Karen today?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, the usual. Her words. Tom, they do hurt." Tom frowned, his features hardening. "I know, Ella. I'm sorry. I wish she'd see what she's doing to us. But listen, you are part of this family. Don't ever doubt that." This year, I decided to keep my birthday low-key, celebrating it quietly at my father-in-law's house with just the close family. It felt right, more like a gathering of warmth and comfort, something I craved more as each year passed. Karen and her family were the last to arrive. As soon as she stepped through the door, she thrust her 2 kids towards me with a smirk, saying, "Here, Ella, I'm sure you're not tired of kids yet. It'll do you good to feel like a full-fledged woman for a change." I bit back the sharp retort that sprang to my lips, choosing instead to smile and usher the children inside, not wanting to start my birthday with a confrontation. Dinner was a lively affair with chatter and laughter, at least on the surface. Karen passed me a gift, a small, elegantly wrapped box. "Why don't you open this later, in your room? When no one will bother you," she whispered, her voice dripping with false sweetness that sent a ripple of anxiety through me. I nodded, tucking the box beside me, my smile fixed. The meal progressed, and just as I was starting to relax, Karen's youngest son, sitting on my lap, looked up at me with innocent eyes and asked loudly, "What does infertile mean?" "Mommy said that's what you are." The words hung heavy in the air, a suffocating silence falling over the table. I froze, words lodged in my throat, the room suddenly feeling too tight. Tom was quick to intervene, his voice calm but firm as he redirected the conversation to a safer topic. I barely heard the words, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. Excusing myself under the pretense of needing to freshen up, I escaped to the sanctuary of the next room. My hands were shaking as I pulled Karen's gift from the folds of my napkin. The unease I'd felt earlier blossomed into full-blown dread as I unwrapped it. Inside the box was a small doll, a grotesque mimicry of a newborn, smeared with what looked like blood. Attached was a note, cruel and heartless. "Maybe now you'll remember what you did to your child." A gasp escaped me, and my hands trembled violently. "Tom," I called out, my voice breaking with panic and grief. Tom rushed in, his face blanching as he saw the contents of the box in my hands. Without a word, he enveloped me in his arms, taking the doll and the note from my shaking hands, his own expression one of horror and fury. "I'm so sorry, Ella. I'm so sorry," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "This is unforgivable." As I clung to him, the walls I had built to hold back my grief crumbled. This was supposed to be a simple birthday celebration, a day of joy, and it had turned into a reminder of the deepest pain I carried. Tom, pale with fury, clutched the small doll and the cruel note his sister had given me. Without a word, he stormed into the living room, where everyone was still gathered, chatting idly. "Look at this. Look at what Karen thought was an appropriate birthday gift for my wife." Tom's voice boomed, shaking with anger as he thrust the doll and the note into the center of the room. The chatter ceased instantly, everyone's eyes widening in shock as they processed the gruesome symbol and the hateful words. "This is beyond sick, Karen," Tom yelled, turning to face his sister, who stood frozen, her face a mask of feigned confusion and defiance. "Tom, Karen started, but Tom cut her off. "No. I don't want to hear your excuses. How could you be so heartless? You're my sister, but I can't even look at you right now. You're not part of this family if this is how you treat people. You're done here," he shouted, his words slicing through the tense air. Dad, who had been silent, his face a growing shade of red from anger, finally spoke up, his voice thundering. "Karen, get out of my house. I don't want to know you anymore. To think I raised someone capable of this." Karen, still clutching at some shred of pride, scoffed and headed towards the door. Once outside, she turned back, a sneer distorting her face. "Fine. But when he's gone, who do you think will inherit all this? My children are still his grandchildren." The audacity of her words struck us silent. We watched, stunned, as she walked to her car where her husband was waiting. Their voices carried back to us, the sharp sound of a heated argument breaking the cold night air. "You idiot. Do you realize what you've just done?" her husband's voice echoed through the parking lot. "Oh, shut up. It's not my fault they can't take a joke," Karen shot back, her voice shrill. Their children, forgotten in the commotion, stood by the doorstep, small and confused. My heart broke for them, witnessing such ugliness. Tom, his father, and I stood by the open door, the cold breeze sweeping in, mingling with the harsh words floating from the parking lot. None of us could find the words to speak. We simply stood there, the door eventually closing with a soft click that sounded final. Inside, the house felt emptier, the echo of the confrontation hanging in every corner. Dad put his arm around me, his old, tired eyes wet with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, Ella. That anyone, let alone my own daughter, could do this." His voice trailed off, choked with emotion. Tom stood by, his jaw clenched, his usual warmth replaced by a cold fury. After a moment, he turned to me, his expression softening. "Ella, I'm so sorry. This should have been a happy occasion. I promise, we'll make this right. Somehow." A few months after that tumultuous birthday, things took another turn. We found out that Karen's husband had left her. He'd been banking on a hefty inheritance from Dad and couldn't handle the fallout of being cut off. Worse yet, Karen started drinking heavily, spiraling down so fast that she eventually lost her rights to see her kids. It was a mess, and those poor kids were stuck in the middle of it. One evening, after Tom and I had put the kids to bed in our guest room, they'd been staying with us temporarily, I brought up the subject that had been weighing on my mind. We were in the kitchen, Tom making a late cup of tea for us. "Tom, we need to talk about your niece and nephew. This situation isn't getting any better, and they need stability," I said, leaning against the counter. Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know. I've been thinking about that too. They're already like family to us. Maybe we should make it official?" I was thinking the same thing. "How do you feel about us becoming their legal guardians?" I asked, watching his reaction closely. He paused, then nodded firmly. "Let's do it. They need us, and I want them to grow up in a loving home. They've been through enough already." We decided to move forward with it, and after a series of meetings with social services and seemingly endless paperwork, we were granted custody of the kids. They were officially part of our family now, and their bright smiles made every bit of bureaucracy worth it. Dad was overjoyed when we told him the news. "I've got enough rooms in this big old house for all of you," he declared one afternoon as we all sat in the living room, a puzzle spread out on the coffee table. "Why don't you all move in permanently? Make it official." Tom and I exchanged a look, the idea having already crossed our minds. "We were hoping you'd say that, Dad. We'd love to," Tom responded, his voice steady, but I could hear the emotion just under the surface. "Good. It's settled then. This house should be filled with family, with laughter and love," Dad said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. "Let's turn this place into a home again." That night, after tucking the kids into their new permanent rooms, Tom and I stood in the doorway of what used to be a guest room, now brightly decorated with posters and toys. "Feels good, doesn't it?" Tom said, wrapping an arm around my waist. "It feels right," I replied, leaning my head against his shoulder. "This house, these kids, your dad, this is family." Life in the big, old house was bustling now, filled with the sounds of children playing and the constant hum of family life. It was a Sunday morning, and the smell of bacon filled the air as I helped the kids set the table for a big family breakfast. "Can I carry the syrup, Mom?" Sammy, the younger one, asked, his eyes wide with the responsibility of the task. "Sure, but be careful. It's sticky, and we don't want to end up eating pancakes with syrup flour," I teased him, handing him the bottle. He nodded solemnly and walked as if he was balancing a pot of gold, his concentration comical. Jenny, his older sister, rolled her eyes at her brother's careful steps. "If you go any slower, we'll have to eat lunch instead of breakfast." Tom chuckled as he flipped another pancake. "Let him be, Jenny. He's doing a great job." As we settled around the table, Tom's dad, who we'd all started affectionately calling Grandpa, took his usual seat at the head of the table, looking around with a content smile. "I can't remember the last time this table was this full." "It's because of Ella," Tom said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "She's the one who's made this house a home again." I felt my cheeks warm with the compliment. "It's all of us, not just me. We're a team, right?" I said, looking around the table at the faces I'd come to love more than I could have imagined. "That's right," Grandpa said, nodding. "But you, my dear, you brought us back together when things were pretty tough. You've got a way of doing that." Later that day, while the kids were playing in the yard, Grandpa called us into the living room. He had a serious look about him, one we'd come to recognize as his announcement face. "I've been thinking," he started, "about this house and everything in it. I've decided to put it in trust for the kids. For their future." Tom and I exchanged surprised glances. "Dad, are you sure? That's a big decision," Tom said. "I've never been sure about anything. This house should stay in the family, and who better to keep it alive than those kids?" Grandpa said, his voice firm. "And Ella," he added, looking at me with a soft smile, "I want you to manage it until they're old enough. You've made it a home once, and I trust you'll keep it that way." I was touched, overwhelmed by his trust and generosity. "Thank you, I'd be honored," I managed to say, feeling a mix of pride and responsibility settle over me. As the day wound down, and I watched the kids chase each other around the garden, the laughter filling the air. I felt a deep sense of peace. Tom came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Looks like we did all right, huh?" "We did more than all right," I replied, leaning back into his embrace. "We made a family." And as the sun set over our home, I knew that no matter what the future held, we had built something enduring here, something that would last, carried forward not just by blood but by the love we shared. I'm Dr. Elaine Harper, but most just call me Elaine these days. After decades of saving lives, I now shuffle papers at a local hospital and consult the occasional greenhorn doctor. But today's not about any of that. Today, I'm preparing to meet Sarah, my son Michael's fiancée. While my usual place is being renovated, I'm holed up in this small, unassuming rental. It's nothing fancy, but it's cozy enough for a temporary spot. I decided to whip up my famous apple pie. Nothing wins people over like a homemade pie, right? The doorbell rang just as I pulled the pie out of the oven. Wiping my hands on my apron, I headed over to open the door. There stood Michael, looking as handsome as ever, and beside him, Sarah. She was as pretty as Michael had described, with a look about her that was both striking and, somehow, calculating. "Mom, this is Sarah," Michael introduced, his voice filled with pride. "Nice to meet you, Elaine," Sarah said, offering a hand that felt a bit too stiff. "Please, come in. I hope you're hungry. Pie's just out of the oven," I smiled, stepping aside to let them in. Sarah stepped inside, her eyes quickly scanning the modest living room and kitchen combo. I caught that little furrow in her brow as she took it all in, the second-hand furniture, the outdated kitchen cabinets, and the plain walls desperately in need of a paint job. "It's cozy," she finally said, a polite smile not quite reaching her eyes. "So, Elaine, Michael tells me you work at the hospital? What do you do there?" "Oh, just some administrative work these days," I replied, brushing off the real weight of my career. "No need to throw my achievements around." Michael shot me a surprised look. "Mom, why don't you tell her about?" I cut him off with a quick wink and began slicing the pie. "Never mind that. Let's have some pie. You'll love it, Sarah. It's my special recipe." As we sat down, Sarah seemed more interested in probing than eating. "So, how did you manage to send Michael to private schools and all? It must have been tough on just a hospital admin's salary." The question caught me off guard. It was too direct, too prying, and it irked me a bit. I steadied my voice. "Well, I had some help from my parents, a little nest egg they left me." I could tell she was sizing me up, trying to piece together how someone with a simple job had a son with such an upscale upbringing. Her questions felt more like an interrogation, each one delivered with a sharpness that was slightly disguised under a veneer of politeness. Michael, bless his heart, seemed oblivious to the tension. "Sarah's been great with all the tech support at her job. You should see her in action, Mom." "That's impressive," I said, turning to Sarah with a genuine interest now. "Technology really is the future, isn't it?" "It is. And it's so rewarding to be on the cutting edge, to be involved in something that really makes a difference," Sarah replied, her tone a mix of pride and something else I couldn't quite place. We continued to chat over pie, the conversation meandering from Michael's job to their wedding plans. I did my best to make Sarah feel welcome, despite the rocky start. As they left later that evening, Michael hugged me tight, but Sarah's goodbye was cool, her smile a practiced curve that didn't quite warm her eyes. As I washed the dishes, I made a mental note to keep a closer eye on things. Michael was my world, and I'd be damned if I let anyone mess with his happiness. After that first awkward meeting in my modest rental, I had hoped things with Sarah would smooth over. But as the wedding planning picked up speed, so did the tension between us. Sarah had a way of sidestepping my attempts at involvement with a sort of polite iciness that left me feeling outside of my own son's future. One afternoon, Michael and Sarah dropped by to discuss some of their wedding arrangements. I had made some coffee and set out a few snacks, trying to make the atmosphere as welcoming as possible. "Mom, we were thinking of picking a venue by the lake. What do you think? Michael asked, spreading some venue photos across the coffee table. Before I could answer, Sarah chimed in. Oh, Elaine, it's a bit out of the city. I'm not sure if some of our guests would appreciate the distance. We're thinking more of a downtown spot, right, Mike? Her tone was casual, but her words cut me off before I could even weigh in. I tried to keep my voice even. The lake sounds lovely, Michael. It'd make for beautiful photos, and a bit of a drive never hurt anyone. Sarah laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. Oh, but you know, traffic can be such a headache. And we wouldn't want our guests spending half the day on the road. I bit my tongue on a sharper reply, instead forcing a smile. Well, downtown is nice too. Plenty of great places there. Michael looked between us, picking up on the tension but not commenting on it. He always hated conflict, especially between the people he loved. Right, well, Sarah's been looking into some great downtown venues. Haven't you, babe? He said, giving Sarah a supportive smile. Absolutely, she replied, flipping her hair over her shoulder. And Elaine, we were also thinking of a modern theme for the wedding, very sleek, very elegant. I assume you'd prefer something more traditional? Her glance flicked over my dated coffee mugs and worn tablecloth, her words dripping with unsaid judgment. I clenched my jaw, feeling the sting. I like modern just fine, I said. The important thing is that you two are happy with it. That's sweet of you, Sarah said, her smile tight. We're just aiming for something a bit more current. It's all about the image, after all. As they continued to discuss details, I found myself nodding along, but my mind was elsewhere. Sarah's every word seemed designed to edge me out, to underline how little she valued my input or presence. After they left, the silence in my apartment felt heavy. I was used to being alone, but this felt different. This was isolation within my own family, a door being softly but firmly closed in my face. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the window, watching the streetlights flicker on. My heart was heavy with a mother's worry. I had always been the one Michael turned to, the one who helped him navigate life's choppy waters. Now, it seemed, Sarah was steering the ship, and she was taking him in a direction I wasn't sure I was welcome. Just have to watch and wait, I muttered to myself, taking a sip. But I'm not out of this game yet. Not by a long shot. It was Michael's birthday, and despite the cold chill in our relationship, I wasn't going to miss my only son's celebration. Sarah had taken the reins, organizing everything, and somehow, my invitation got lost in the shuffle. But a mother's place is at her son's side, especially on his birthday, so I went anyway. I arrived at Michael's house with a small, carefully wrapped gift in my hands. The place was bustling, laughter and music spilling out the door as I approached. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding in my chest. It was one thing to crash a party, another to crash your son's party uninvited. Sarah opened the door, her smile fading a bit when she saw me. Elaine, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you. Her words stung, but I kept my composure. Wouldn't miss my son's birthday. Where's Michael? He's around somewhere, she said, stepping aside reluctantly to let me in. Well, come in, I guess. The house was decked out in blues and grays, a posh, modern look that screamed Sarah's touch. I moved through groups of people, none of whom I recognized. They were all Sarah's friends, young and trendy, the air filled with their laughter and the clinking of glasses. Finally, I found Michael, chatting with a group of people who looked to be colleagues from his work. Michael, I called out, my voice catching a bit. He turned, his face lighting up when he saw me. Mom, you made it. He excused himself and came over, giving me a big hug. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I said, handing him his gift. Happy birthday, honey. Thanks, Mom. I'm so glad you're here. He looked genuinely happy, but there was a hint of confusion in his eyes, as if he was trying to figure out why I'd say such a thing. Sarah appeared beside us, her smile tight. "Michael, your friends were asking about you," she said, then turned to me. "Can I get you a drink, Elaine?" "No, thanks, I'm fine," I replied, feeling out of place with her polite but cold demeanor. As the evening wore on, I tried to mingle, but Sarah's friends were a tight-knit group, and I felt like an outsider. Every conversation felt strained, with Sarah often interjecting to steer Michael away or dominate the discussions with tales of her work accomplishments and plans for their future. At one point, I overheard her talking to a friend, her voice just loud enough for me to catch. "Yeah, it's a bit awkward that she showed up. I didn't think she'd come, given, the vibe." The words were like a slap. I wasn't just uninvited, I was unwanted. My presence was making her uncomfortable, or worse, embarrassing her in front of her circle. The realization was a bitter pill, and I found myself retreating to a quiet corner, nursing a drink I didn't remember accepting. Michael found me a little while later, his brow furrowed. "Mom, are you alright? You seem a bit off." I forced a smile, not wanting to ruin his day with my feelings. "Just a bit tired, that's all. It's been a long day." "Do you want to stay longer, or would you like me to drive you home?" His concern was genuine, but the last thing I wanted was to drag him away from his friends. "No, you stay. Enjoy your party. I'll catch a cab," I said, standing up. "I just wanted to see you and wish you happy birthday in person." He hugged me, looking worried. "Thanks for coming, Mom. I love you." "I love you too, baby. Always." With that, I slipped out, the sound of laughter echoing behind me as the door closed. The night air was cold, but it was a relief compared to the warmth of a party where I was clearly an outsider. It was a crisp morning, just one day before Michael's wedding. I was in my kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the silence, when I heard a knock at the door. Expecting it might be the delivery, I wiped my hands on my apron and headed to answer. To my surprise, it was Sarah, standing there alone, her face set in a serious expression that didn't bode well. "Sarah, what brings you here this early?" I asked, managing a polite tone. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her eyes scanning the modesty of my rented apartment with thinly veiled disdain. "Elaine, I'll get straight to the point. I'm here to make things easier for everyone. I have a proposal for you." "Oh?" I replied, curiosity piqued despite the chill settling in my veins. She pulled an envelope from her sleek, oversized purse and held it out to me. "I'm offering you $1,000 to not attend the wedding tomorrow. We think it's for the best." I stared at her, dumbfounded, not from the shock of her audacity, but that she dared think this would be acceptable. "And why would you think I'd accept such an offer?" Sarah's lips twisted in a frown as she responded, "Let's be real, Elaine. Your presence might not mesh well with the kind of event we're planning. With all the important guests coming." My hands clenched at my sides, but I knew I needed to handle this cleverly. "I'm sorry, I think I didn't hear you correctly," I lied, tapping my ear like I often did when I pretended not to hear something inconvenient. "You want to pay me to not attend my own son's wedding because—" With a sigh of annoyance, Sarah repeated louder. "Because, Elaine, you don't exactly fit the scene. You dress and, well, everything about you, it's just not up to par. We have very influential people attending, and we can't have you there, looking like you do." She paused, perhaps expecting some kind of hurt or resignation from me, but I stood firm, my resolve hardening. "Keep going, Sarah. I'm listening. And with this money," she continued, waving the envelope, "you can maybe fix up this place or get something nice to wear some other time. You should be thankful I'm offering this." I nearly laughed at her nerve. She thought this apartment was mine and that I needed her charity to spruce it up. But I kept my expression neutral, nodded, and took the envelope. "All right, Sarah. If that's what you really want." Her relief was palpable as she gave a tight smile. "Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this." After she left, I closed the door gently behind her, my hands trembling with a cocktail of anger and adrenaline. I took out my phone and stopped the recording. Her words, clear and unmistakably cruel, had been captured in full. I picked up my phone and dialed Michael, my voice urgent yet clear. "Michael, can you come over right now? It's important. We need to talk about something serious." "Sure, Mom, I'll be there as soon as I can." "Is everything okay?" His voice was filled with concern, and I could tell he sensed the gravity in my tone. "Just come, we'll talk when you get here." When Michael arrived, he looked worried. He barely sat down before I said, "Listen to this," and played the recording of Sarah's proposition. The color drained from his face as he listened, his expression morphing into one of shock and hurt. "Mom, I'm so sorry you had to hear that. I can't believe she'd say those things," he stammered once the recording ended. "The wedding is tomorrow, Michael. What do you want to do?" I asked, my voice soft but firm, needing him to make the next move. He ran his hands through his hair, a sign of his frustration and confusion. "I want to confront her, tell her it's over, and cancel the wedding. I can't marry someone capable of this." I held up a hand, stopping him. "If you do that now, everyone will see you as the bad guy, and she'll play the victim. We can't let her narrative control the story." Michael paused, taking in my words. "So, what do we do?" "We need to show everyone her true colors. Let them see the Sarah I heard on this recording." My voice was calm, but carried the weight of my resolve. He nodded slowly, understanding the plan. "Okay, Mom. I won't say anything to her yet." After Michael left, I made several phone calls to old friends and former patients, people who knew me well and had been part of my life thanks to the surgeries I'd performed over the years. We talked about old times, and I hinted at needing their support, though I didn't dive into specifics over the phone. Sitting back on the couch, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. Tomorrow would be a significant day, one way or another. I was ready to defend my family's honor and show everyone the kind of person Sarah really was. It wasn't just about stopping a wedding, it was about protecting my son from a life of manipulation and deceit. The wedding day arrived with a mix of nerves and a heavy sense of duty. Today would be a turning point, one way or another. As guests settled into the beautifully decorated hall, whispering excitedly about the day's events, I prepared myself for what was arguably the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. The plan was simple but devastating. Just before Sarah and her father were to make their grand entrance, a video showcasing the couple's journey together was scheduled to play. Instead, I had arranged with the AV technician to play the audio recording of Sarah's cruel proposition. My heart pounded as the moment drew near, knowing all too well the impact of what was about to be heard. As guests chatted and looked forward to the start, I signaled to the technician. The lights dimmed, and instead of the soft opening music of the couple's video, Sarah's voice filled the room, clear and sharp. "I'm offering you $1,000 to not attend the wedding tomorrow. We think it's for the best." You could hear the collective gasp, the murmur of confusion and shock as the guests processed the words. They looked around at each other, disbelief etched on their faces. Just then, the doors opened for what was meant to be Sarah's grand entrance with her father. The timing couldn't have been more poignant. The room fell into an uneasy silence as they walked in, her father unaware of the undercurrents, smiling and waving, while Sarah's smile faltered under the weight of dozens of eyes filled with sudden wariness and judgment. Without missing a beat, as they reached the front, I switched to the second part of my plan. The screen now showed a video montage of testimonials from prominent city figures, colleagues, and patients, all speaking to my years as a dedicated surgeon, the lives I'd saved, and my contributions to the community. The contrast was stark. Here was the proof of the life I had led, one of service and respect, directly countering Sarah's insinuations about my character and status. Sarah stood frozen, her face draining of color as the accolades rolled on. The guests, now completely turned against her, murmured amongst themselves, their expressions ranging from pity to disdain. Sarah's mother, sitting in the front row, had tears streaming down her face, her hands covering her mouth in shock. Sarah looked around helplessly, her earlier composure shattered. She had been exposed, her superficial judgments laid bare before the friends and family she had hoped to impress. As the revealing video ended, a hush fell over the room. It was a heavy silence, thick with the weight of revelations and shattered expectations. My son, Michael, took a deep breath and walked up to the microphone with a solemn expression. The room's attention was fixated on him, every pair of eyes filled with curiosity and concern. "I'm very sorry," Michael began, his voice echoing through the quiet hall, "that I didn't see the callousness and arrogance of my bride sooner." He paused, looking over the crowd with a regretful gaze. "I am canceling the wedding and I apologize to all of you for the inconvenience." He then turned to look at me, his expression softening. "Mom, I'm sorry. Thank you for everything you've done for me. Without you, I might have made the biggest mistake of my life." His voice cracked slightly, and my heart swelled with both pride and sorrow for what he was enduring. A murmur of support rose from the crowd, and a few guests stood up, applauding him for his courage. I felt a tear slip down my cheek as I watched my son, standing there, embodying the values I'd hoped to instill in him, a man of integrity and strength. At that moment, Sarah, who had been standing off to the side, burst into tears. "I didn't know about your mother's background," she sobbed, her voice desperate and pleading. "This changes everything. Please, Michael, can we just talk about this?" But Michael shook his head, his decision firm. "There's nothing left to discuss. It's over, Sarah." Even her own parents looked at her with a mix of shock and indignation, their expressions conveying their disappointment and disbelief at their daughter's actions. They had been caught in the uncomfortable position of witnessing their child's failings laid bare before a room full of guests. Seeing no way to salvage the situation, Sarah's frustration and embarrassment boiled over. "This is all your fault," she yelled at me, pointing a trembling finger in my direction. Her voice was raw, laden with emotion. "You've ruined everything." With those final words, she turned and ran from the hall, her sobs echoing behind her as the door slammed shut. The room was left in a state of shock, everyone processing the drama that had unfolded so unexpectedly. I moved to Michael's side, putting an arm around him. "You did the right thing," I whispered, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on us both. He nodded, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have gotten through this without you." As the guests slowly began to leave, offering quiet words of support or simply a squeeze of the shoulder, I felt a mix of relief and profound sadness. The day had not gone as any of us had envisioned, but truth and honesty had prevailed. Michael was hurt, but he was free from a future that could have been much more painful. After the storm had settled, I wrapped up the renovation of my house. It's beautiful now, a place filled with peace and light, much like the new chapter of my life. 2 years had flown by since that fateful day. Sarah, Michael's ex-fiancée, tried to reach out to me a few times, pleading for reconciliation. But after everything, how could I? I firmly told her no each time. Last I heard, she was fired from her job. Turns out her boss was at the wedding, saw everything, and wasn't too pleased. She moved out of the city afterward, and I don't know where she is now. In the meantime, life moved on in the best ways possible. I retired from my administrative role at the hospital, finally giving myself the break I deserved after years of service. Not long after, Michael met Anna. She's a breath of fresh air, a truly beautiful soul inside and out. They got married last spring, and it was the kind of wedding we'd always dreamed of, full of love, laughter, and genuine happiness. Anna respects me greatly, and our bond is strong. It's a relief and a joy to see Michael so happy and well-matched. Just the other day, over a quiet dinner at my place, Anna mentioned how much she values our relationship. "Elaine, I really admire how you handle everything with such grace. I'm so grateful for how welcoming you've been," she said, her sincerity touching my heart. "I'm just thrilled to have you in the family, dear. You make my son happy, and that's all I could ever ask for," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. Their kindness and love filled the house that had once echoed with too many silences. Now, it was a home in the truest sense, brimming with the promise of future gatherings and family milestones. Feeling lighter and more adventurous than I had in years, I recently made a decision that surprised even myself. I booked a trip around the world. I've always put it off, but now, with everything falling into place, it felt like the perfect time. When I told Michael and Anna, they were thrilled. "Mom, that's amazing. You've always talked about seeing the world," Michael said, his eyes lighting up. "Yeah, and you've more than earned it," Anna added, giving me a hug. "We'll manage just fine here. Go make some incredible memories." So, here I am, finalizing itineraries and packing bags, ready to explore the places I've only read about or seen in pictures. It feels like I'm not just traveling to different countries, but also towards a new phase of life, one where I can just enjoy and embrace the beauty of the world. I've always believed in making my own way, so living solo in this bustling city, just a stone's throw from where I work as an editor at a large book publishing, has been perfect for me. My folks, bless them, are just a phone call away, but here in the city, it's all on me. This one Saturday, needing a break from the usual, I decided to swap out manuscripts for some fresh air and headed to the nearby park. It's my go-to spot for some quiet, usually. I was lost in thought, maybe more than I should have been, because I didn't see the bike path up ahead. "Watch out." That was the first thing he said to me. I jumped back, just in time as this guy on a bicycle screeched to a halt right where I would have been a second later. "Jesus, lady, you trying to get yourself killed?" he snapped, catching his breath. He was clearly annoyed but also seemed relieved that he hadn't hit me. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking. Are you okay?" I stammered, feeling like a complete fool. "Yeah, I'm fine. No thanks to you, though. You gotta watch where you're going." His tone was harsh, but his concern seemed genuine. I know. I just zoned out. "Thanks for stopping in time," I replied, feeling my cheeks heat up. He ran a hand through his hair, looking a bit calmer. "All right, no harm done, I guess. But maybe keep off the bike lane, huh?" "Deal," I said, managing a small smile. "I'm Jenna, by the way." "Tom," he said, offering a hand, which I shook. "So, Jenna, always this distracted, or is it just my lucky day?" "Only on Saturdays," I quipped back, feeling a bit more at ease. We both laughed, and somehow, that awkward start turned into coffee at the nearby cafe. Turns out, Tom worked at a car sales company. He was straightforward, kind of blunt, but funny. We talked about everything, from books, which he admitted he didn't read much of, to cars, which I knew nothing about. It was easy, simple conversation, the kind where you suddenly realize hours have passed. "Didn't think I'd end up spending my afternoon with the woman who almost wrecked my bike," Tom said as we stood up to leave. "And I didn't think I'd be thanking the same guy who called me a killer on our first chat," I shot back, laughing. "Well, guess we're both full of surprises. Can I see you again, Jenna? Maybe on a day when you're not in the path of moving vehicles?" I nodded, smiling. "I think I can arrange that." Over the next few weeks, Tom and I started seeing each other more often. At first, it was just casual coffee dates and walks through different parts of the city. He had a rough way of talking, but it grew on me, felt real and down to earth. Before I knew it, these friendly meetups turned into late-night talks, dinners at places that became our spots, and slow, revealing conversations about our lives. There was something about Tom that felt familiar and exciting at the same time. I was drawn to his blunt charm, and from those ordinary meetings, an affair began. The more things progressed with Tom, the more inevitable it became that I'd meet his folks. They lived in the suburbs, a nice big house with a yard and all. Tom had warned me his mom was a bit traditional, but I wasn't prepared for just how much. We pulled up to their house, and right from the start, it was clear his parents had been eagerly waiting for us. His mom, a robust lady with a warm smile, welcomed us at the door, enveloping Tom in a big hug and giving me a once-over that felt a bit too long. "Jenna, dear, it's so nice to finally meet you. Tom has told us so much about you. she said, pulling me into a hug that felt more like she was trying to figure out my dress size than welcome me. Thanks, Mrs. Harper, it's great to meet you too, I replied, trying to match her warmth. We sat down in the living room, and Mrs. Harper wasted no time diving into the conversation. So, Jenna, Tom tells us you work at a publishing house. That must be exciting, handling books all day. It is, Mrs. Harper. I love my job. It's fulfilling to be part of the creative process, I said, glancing at Tom, hoping he'd help steer the conversation. That's nice, dear. But you know, once you two settle down, you'll need to think about what's really important. Family should come first, and a woman's touch in the home is irreplaceable, she said, not missing a beat. Tom's dad, who had been quietly observing the exchange, chimed in with a nod. Absolutely. A stable home is the foundation of a good life. Right, son? Tom shifted uncomfortably but managed a nod. Yeah, Mom, Jenna's really great at managing her time though. She's pretty organized and sharp. Well, of course, but managing a home is different, you know. It's a full-time commitment, his mom countered, fixing her gaze on me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. I cleared my throat, feeling the need to defend my position. I believe it's possible to balance both, Mrs. Harper. I think a modern family can have two working parents. It's all about teamwork, isn't it? Mrs. Harper smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, dear, that's a nice thought. But in reality, children need their mother. And a house needs a woman's touch, not just a quick sweep. The conversation drifted to other things, but the seed had been planted. Dinner was served, and it was like sitting in a minefield. Every compliment about the food felt like a veiled suggestion for me to take notes. Jenna, do you cook often? Mrs. Harper asked as she served a perfectly roasted chicken. Sometimes, when I can. Work keeps me pretty busy, I replied, trying to keep it light. Ah, well, you'll find great satisfaction in keeping your family fed and your house in order. There's a rhythm to it that's quite fulfilling, she explained, passing the mashed potatoes like she was handing down wisdom. Tom kicked me under the table lightly, a silent signal to not get riled up. I just smiled, sipping my wine a bit more than usual, thinking about how this dinner was more an interview than a meal. Tom and I decided to tie the knot after a year of dating. Despite the reservations I had from meeting his parents, love, as they say, makes you hopeful. We planned a modest wedding, just close family and friends, nothing fancy, just how we both wanted it, or so I thought. The wedding day was a blur of smiles, flowers, and a small crowd of well-wishers at a local community hall we'd booked. It was quaint, draped in simple decorations, and there was an air of excitement, or maybe that was just my nerves. The ceremony was short and sweet. We exchanged vows, rings, and a kiss that sealed the deal. Everyone clapped, and it felt right, at that moment at least. At the reception, while we were munching on finger food, Tom leaned over and said, "So, I was thinking about our next steps, about moving into a bigger place." I nodded, munching on a celery stick. Sure, we talked about needing more space. What did you find? There's this great apartment, bigger and really nice. It's actually near where I grew up, he added, watching my reaction closely. Near your parents? I asked, trying not to sound too concerned. Yeah, it's convenient, and Mom and Dad would be thrilled to have us close by. Plus, Dad mentioned he could help us out with the rent for a bit. I paused, thinking about the constant visits from his mom I'd have to endure. That's generous. But, Tom, you know how I value our independence. I don't want to feel like we're not on our own. Tom squeezed my hand. I get it, Jenna, but think about it. It's a good financial move, and it'll be nice to have family nearby, you know, for when we decide to start our own. I wasn't convinced, but decided to give it a shot. Okay, we can try it. But if it feels too crowded, we need to reconsider, all right? Deal. Tom smiled, and we went back to entertaining our guests. Moving in was a hassle. The apartment was indeed spacious and had a lovely view of a nearby park, but it was also a 40-minute drive from my work, which added to my daily commute. Tom's parents, true to form, were over often. His mom came by with housewarming gifts, which were really just ways to imprint her taste on our decor. "Jenna, dear, I brought you some nice curtains, much better than those drab ones you picked out," she said one afternoon, holding up a garish set of floral curtains. "Thanks, Mrs. Harper, but I actually like the ones we have." I tried to keep my tone light. "Oh, but these will brighten up the living room so much more," she insisted, already walking over to change them. The tension was palpable each time she visited, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. Tom did his best to mediate, but it was clear that his idea of close to family and mine were worlds apart. Over time, the topic of how we should live our lives began cropping up more frequently. Tom increasingly expressed his preference for traditional family roles. "Jen, think about it. You managing the home, me bringing in the cash, it just makes sense," he'd argue, his voice firm as if that settled the matter. "But look at this," I'd respond, pulling up our budget on my laptop. "Two incomes, especially now with everything that's going on, pandemics, economic dips, it just makes more sense. We're more secure this way." Tom would shake his head, clearly frustrated. "That's not how a family should work. It's not just about money, Jenna. But it is about stability, Tom. And us both working doesn't mean we can't have a great home life." I tried to reason, but it felt like talking to a wall. Meanwhile, Mrs. Harper practically turned our apartment into her second home. She was over all the time, and every visit felt like an inspection. "Jenna, you're not thinking of staying in that job forever, are you?" she'd start as soon as she walked in. I'd barely have my coat off, and there she was, questioning my life choices. "I actually enjoy my work, Mrs. Harper. It's important to me," I'd say, trying to keep my voice steady and polite. She'd tisk and start prowling around the apartment, her fingers sliding over surfaces, looking for dust. "Well, if you were home more, maybe this place would be cleaner," she'd say, holding up her dusty finger like it was evidence in a trial. "It's clean enough. We live here, it's not a museum," I'd shoot back, feeling my patience thinning. But she'd already be on to her next inspection point, flinging open the refrigerator to critique my grocery choices. "This isn't enough food for a healthy meal. And look at these leftovers, don't you cook fresh?" she'd complain, her nose wrinkling in disapproval. I tried talking to Tom about it. "Your mom is overstepping, and it's stressing me out. I can't keep up with her expectations." Tom, ever the peacemaker, would sigh. "She's just trying to help, Jenna. Maybe if you were home more, things wouldn't be so tense." One evening, after a particularly hard day at work, I came home to find Tom in a foul mood. "This place is a mess, Jenna. And dinner's just, it's not up to par," he said, poking disdainfully at the pasta I had whipped up. "I'm doing my best, Tom. I'm working full-time and trying to keep up with the house. But it's never good enough for you, or your mom," I snapped, frustration boiling over. "Well, maybe if you weren't trying to do both, you'd actually do one right," he shot back, his words sharp and cutting. I was taken aback. "Are you saying I need to choose between my job and our home? If you can't handle both, then yes. Maybe you should just be a housewife. Honestly, if things don't change, I don't see how this can work out," he threatened, his tone cold and serious. I felt a chill run down my spine. The man I loved was giving me an ultimatum that felt like a noose tightening around my neck. Be a housewife or bust. It was clear that the life I had built, my career, my independence, was slipping through my fingers the more I tried to cling to it. The tension in our home was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tom and I were at a breaking point over my career and our lifestyle. I loved him, deeply, so I made a choice that I thought could smooth things over. I went to my boss and laid it out. I was quitting to be a full-time housewife. My boss was shocked, disappointed even. He knew how much my career meant to me. But then he offered a lifeline, remote work. I could still edit, only from home. It wasn't ideal, but it felt like a compromise I could live with without completely losing myself. I didn't tell Tom about the remote work arrangement. Instead, I told him I had quit my job to focus on our home. His face lit up in a way that both warmed and broke my heart. "That's great, Jen. It'll be better for us, you'll see," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like he was clinging to a newfound peace of mind. I threw myself into the role of housewife, handling the chores, cooking meals, and making sure everything was just right for when he came home from work. But as soon as he left for work each morning, my laptop opened, and I was back at my editor's desk, remotely. The balance was precarious, juggling my secret work life with the domestic life Tom believed I had embraced. I funneled the money I earned into a separate account. It seemed smarter to have a financial cushion that Tom didn't know about, just in case. Living on just Tom's salary was his idea, and it strained our finances more than he realized. Just 3 months in, the cracks began to show. "We're running low on everything, Tom. We need to rethink our budget." I approached the topic one evening, hoping for a rational conversation. "What are you talking about? You're just not managing our money right. You need to cut back on spending," he snapped back, frustration lacing his words. His words stung. I hadn't bought anything for myself in ages, always hunting for deals and scrimping wherever I could. I've been as frugal as possible. "It's not enough," I insisted, my voice tight with hurt. The next day, as if on cue, Mrs. Harper showed up at our door. "Tom told me you're having trouble with the budget. Let me show you how to shop properly," she declared, her tone brooking no argument. The following days were a crash course in extreme penny pinching. She dragged me to the store, pointing out the cheapest items, many of which were of questionable quality. "These are what you should be buying, Jenna. None of that fancy stuff," she instructed, her voice harsh as if I was a wayward child. She even showed me how to dilute dish soap to make it last longer, her eyes sharp. "You'll learn to make do with less. It's good for you," she said, nodding to herself more than to me. Every receipt was scrutinized, every expenditure questioned. "Why did you buy this? You don't need to be traveling around when there's work to be done here," she scolded when she saw a bus ticket stub. It was more than just saving money, it felt demeaning, like I was under constant surveillance. Living this way, under the strict rules dictated by Tom and enforced by his mother, was stifling. One afternoon, I locked myself in the bedroom and called my mom. "Mom, I don't know what to do anymore," I started, my voice cracking a bit as I explained how Mrs. Harper had been teaching me to stretch every dollar to the extreme, making me feel like I was living in the Great Depression. "That's not normal, Jenna," my mom said firmly. "You're supposed to be partners. It sounds like she's trying to control everything. And Tom should not be letting this happen." I sighed, feeling a small wave of relief just hearing her say it. "I know, Mom. It's just so hard." I try to stand up for myself, but it always turns into a huge fight. Just as I was about to say more, the bedroom door swung open. Tom stood there, his face twisted in anger. He had overheard me. Without a word, he marched over, grabbed the phone from my hand, and ended the call. "A wife shouldn't be complaining about her husband and mother-in-law like some kind of traitor," he snapped, his voice cold and harsh. I was stunned. "Tom, I was talking to my mom. I needed someone to talk to." "That doesn't give you the right to badmouth us. Especially not to your mother," he retorted, his eyes narrowing. The argument spiraled from there, voices raised, words that couldn't be taken back. In a huff, Tom stormed out, slamming the door behind him. He was gone for the rest of the day, leaving me alone with my thoughts, which were a tangled mess of sadness and frustration. It was well past midnight when I heard the key turn in the lock. Tom stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. His usual stern demeanor was replaced by a sloppy, cruel drunkenness. "I should have listened to my mom. She warned me about marrying someone like you," he slurred, his words like daggers. I stood up, my own anger rising. "Tom, you're a grown man. Stop letting your mother run our lives. You don't need her approval for every little thing." That seemed to set him off even more. "If you're so unhappy, why don't you just leave?" he yelled, stepping close, his voice booming in the confined space of our apartment. It's 3 a.m., Tom. It's not safe, I replied, trying to reason with him, even as my voice shook. I don't care. Get out, he shouted, not even looking at me. I hesitated only for a moment before I started to pack the essentials, my phone, some clothes. When I went to grab my wallet, Tom snatched it from my hands. I earned this money, Jenna. You have no right to it, he said, venom in his tone. Panic surged through me, but then I remembered my own account, my secret safety net. I called a taxi and left without looking back, Tom's angry shouts fading behind me as I closed the door. I found a temporary shelter in a nearby hotel. The morning after leaving Tom, I was up early, my mind racing with all that needed to be done. The first stop was a lawyer's office. It was a small, unassuming place, but the lawyer, Mr. Edwards, was sharp and kind. He listened as I laid out everything that had happened, nodding in understanding. We'll get the divorce papers drawn up right away. You have rights, Jenna, and we'll make sure you're protected, Mr. Edwards assured me, his voice firm and confident. Armed with my newly drafted divorce papers, I returned to the apartment where Tom and I had lived. The place was silent, the remnants of last night's chaos evident in the strewn bottles and Tom's snoring form on the couch. He hadn't even made it to the bedroom. I began packing my things quickly, stuffing clothes, books, and personal items into boxes and bags. The reality of leaving this chapter behind felt both liberating and heavy. As I zipped up the last suitcase, Tom stirred on the couch. Jenna? Hey, can you grab me a beer? He mumbled, still half asleep, not even noticing the suitcases. Instead of a beer, I placed the divorce papers on the coffee table in front of him. Here's what I can give you, I said, my voice steady. Tom blinked, slowly coming to. He picked up the papers, scanning them, a smirk appearing on his face. What's this? You're serious? Come on, Jen. You'll come back. Just say sorry to me and my mom, promise to follow the rules, and we can forget all this. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, bitter sound. No, Tom. I'm not coming back. Not now, not ever. This is goodbye. I left the apartment, the door closing behind me with a click that sounded like the locking of my past. I moved into a rented apartment that afternoon, a small place, but mine alone. Returning to work full-time at the office felt like stepping back into a world where I was in control. The familiar buzz of the office, the clack of keyboards, and the scent of coffee brewing, everything reminded me why I loved my job. I also reconnected with my friends and my parents, rebuilding the bridges that had been strained during my turbulent marriage. Catching up over long dinners and weekend brunches, I shared laughs and stories, feeling the strength of these relationships that had weathered so much. One late afternoon, as I was wrapping up a manuscript, my phone buzzed. Glancing at the screen, I saw a name I hadn't expected, Claire, a close friend from the city who had been my sounding board through the worst of times. Hey Claire, what's up? I answered, smiling as I heard her enthusiastic voice. Jenna, I'm so glad I caught you. Listen, a few of us are getting together this weekend at that new cafe downtown. You have to come. It's been ages, and everyone's dying to see you. The cafe meetup turned out to be just what I needed. Laughter, updates, and a gentle nudge back into the social world. It felt good to be among friends, to share stories and listen to theirs, feeling the camaraderie that I'd missed. As the gathering wound down, Claire caught me by the arm as we were leaving. Hey, how are you really doing, Jen? She asked, her gaze piercing, but kind. I took a deep breath, letting the truth surface. I'm getting there, Claire. It's been tough, but I think I'm finally moving forward for real. A few months into my new old life, my phone rang while I was reviewing a particularly challenging manuscript. The screen flashed Tom's name. Taking a deep breath, I answered, my voice cool and collected. Jenna, hey, I need to talk to you. Tom's voice came through, hesitant and a bit desperate. What is it, Tom? I asked, not really in the mood for pleasantries. Well, I got fired. he blurted out. And things are tight. I was wondering. You need money. I finished for him, not surprised by the turn of the conversation. Yeah. And, well, I was thinking maybe we could start over, you know? If you apologize to my mom and me, and we could try again. You could take care of us. His voice was hopeful, almost pleading. I couldn't help it, I burst into laughter. The idea was so ludicrous it took me a moment to gather myself. Tom, you're joking, right? You want me to apologize, support you, and come back to all that mess? You've ditched your principles pretty fast, haven't you? There was a silence on the other end. So, is that a no? Yes, Tom, that's a no. A big one, I replied, still chuckling at the absurdity. I'm doing well, really well actually, and I'm not about to give up my freedom and happiness for another round of whatever that was. Hanging up, I shook my head in disbelief. The call was a stark reminder of how far I had come and how much I had changed. I was free, truly free, and it felt liberating. I turned back to my manuscript, a smile playing on my lips. The idea of jumping back into a relationship wasn't appealing at the moment. I was enjoying my independence too much, savoring the peace that came with it. Hey everyone, I'm Eleanor. I've hit 67 this year, and just as I thought I'd start relaxing, life tossed me another curveball. But let me backtrack a bit to set the stage for this whole drama. I've spent a good part of my life with George, my husband of over 40 years. We've had our ups and downs, but we stuck together through everything. Then there's our son, Michael. He's been the light of our life. Ever since he was a little boy, scribbling on the walls with crayons, we knew he had something special. Despite knowing the starving artist cliché, we never stopped him from chasing his dream to paint. It wasn't easy, mind you. Money was tight, and the uncertainty of his next paycheck was always looming over us. When Michael turned 30 last year, he dropped the news he was getting hitched to Lucy, his girlfriend of just about a year. We were thrilled, honestly. Lucy seemed nice enough, quiet but polite, and she made our boy happy. That was good enough for us. We went all out for the wedding to give them a day to remember. The first hint of trouble came subtle as a sledgehammer. Lucy had her heart set on a ridiculously expensive wedding dress, something that screamed more demand than request. Eleanor, I just found the perfect dress, she'd said, flashing her phone with a picture of a designer gown that cost more than what we spent on our first car. Lucy, honey, that's a bit steep, isn't it? I tried to keep my voice light, but my stomach was doing somersaults. It's my special day, Eleanor. I want to look stunning. You understand, right? Her tone wasn't mean, but there was a sharpness there that you couldn't ignore. So, I caved. All right, we'll figure something out. And we did. It set us back a pretty penny, but the look on Michael's face when he saw her in that gown, I told myself it was worth it. After the wedding, we helped them get settled into a cozy apartment downtown. Rents aren't cheap, but we didn't want them starting their married life in some dingy hole in the wall. I remember that morning clearly. The sun was shining, but not too hot, a perfect spring day. George and I were in the middle of enjoying our second cup of coffee when Michael called. He sounded more excited than usual, and I knew immediately something big was up. Mom, Lucy, and I have some news, Michael blurted out before I even had a chance to say a proper hello. What's the good word, son? I asked, my heart starting to race a bit. George put down his newspaper, giving me a look that said he was thinking the same thing I was. We're going to have a baby, Michael announced. You could hear the smile in his voice. It was one of those moments that just fills a room with joy, even through a phone line. Oh, Michael, that's wonderful news, I exclaimed. George was grinning from ear to ear, nodding in agreement as if Michael could see him. Thanks, Mom. We wanted you to know first. We're telling Lucy's parents tonight. I turned to George, mouthing, we're going to be grandparents. And he just chuckled, shaking his head in happy disbelief. That afternoon, I decided to visit Michael and Lucy to congratulate them in person and maybe talk about how we could help out. When I got there, Lucy was sitting on the couch, looking a bit pale but happy. "Congratulations, dear," I said, giving her a gentle hug. "You okay? You look a bit tired." "Thanks, Eleanor. Yeah, just a bit of morning sickness, nothing major," Lucy replied, managing a small smile. "That's normal, honey. Anything you need, just let me know," I offered, feeling that rush of excitement about being a grandma. "Actually, since you mentioned it," Lucy started, hesitating a bit. "I was wondering if you could help out around here sometimes? With the baby coming, things are going to get a bit hectic." "Of course, dear. You know I'm here for whatever you need. Cleaning, cooking, you name it," I said, eager to be involved. Lucy's response was a bit more direct than I anticipated. "Great, because I can hardly keep up as it is." And with the baby, her voice trailed off, leaving the sentence hanging with an unspoken expectation. I reassured her. "Say no more, I'll come by a few times a week and help out." "How does that sound?" "That sounds necessary," Lucy replied, not exactly overflowing with gratitude but clearly relieved. On my way home, I couldn't shake a twinge of concern. Lucy's words, "that sounds necessary," echoed in my head. It wasn't the warm thank you I'd expected. But I brushed it off, telling myself I was just being overly sensitive. After all, she was pregnant and probably overwhelmed. True to my word, I started helping out at Michael and Lucy's place the very next week. I'd sweep in with my bag of cleaning supplies and a casserole or two in hand, ready to lighten their load. Michael was always so grateful. He'd give me a big hug and say, "Mom, you're a lifesaver." Lucy, on the other hand, wasn't so easy to please. After a few visits, she started picking at the details. "Eleanor, you missed a spot there on the counter, or this casserole is a bit bland, isn't it?" Her words stung a bit more each time. It was clear she was taking my efforts for granted, and her occasional thanks felt more obligatory than genuine. I kept my frustrations to myself, mostly. After all, I was there for my son and my future grandchild, not for praise. But it was hard not to feel a bit used when even your best efforts are met with criticism instead of appreciation. It was a Tuesday, a day like any other, when I headed over to Michael and Lucy's apartment to do some chores and drop off some homemade chicken soup. I thought it might help Lucy with the nausea she'd been having. I'd just finished up cleaning the kitchen and was setting the soup on the stove to warm when Lucy came shuffling in, looking worse for wear. "Oh, Lucy, you don't look so hot today. Why don't you sit down and I'll get you some of this soup? It'll make you feel better," I said, trying to be as cheerful as possible. Lucy grimaced, holding her stomach, and muttered, "I hope it's better than last time, Eleanor. That soup didn't sit well with me at all." I was taken aback, but kept my tone light. "I'm sorry to hear that, dear. I made sure to use all fresh ingredients this time, just in case." Lucy slumped into a chair, eyeing the pot as if it might bite. "Well, we'll see. Last time I was sick all night. Michael had to stay up with me." Now, I knew for a fact there was nothing wrong with the soup I made last time. But I bit my tongue, not wanting to start a fuss. "Let me get you a small bowl, and you can see how you feel," I offered, ladling out some soup. She took a tentative sip and then another. "It's okay, I guess," she conceded, though her tone was less than grateful. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound being the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall. Suddenly, Lucy clutched her stomach and let out a groan. "Oh no, not again," she gasped, her face twisting in discomfort. I jumped up, my heart racing. "What's wrong? Do you need me to call Michael? Or a doctor?" "No. It's your damn soup. It's making me sick again," she shouted, pushing the bowl away so forcefully it nearly toppled off the table. I felt a flash of anger, but swallowed it down. "Lucy, I assure you, the soup is fine. Maybe it's something else? You've been having morning sickness." "No, Eleanor. It's your cooking. You're trying to poison me or something. Lucy was on her feet now, her voice rising with every word. I stood there, stunned. Poison you? Lucy, why would I ever do such a thing? I'm here to help. Lucy's eyes were wild, her breathing heavy. I don't know, but I can't trust you. You and your old-fashioned ways, always meddling. I need you to leave. Now. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, my mind reeling. As I walked down the hallway, tears stung my eyes. How had it come to this? I'd only ever wanted to help. The day of the baby shower arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. Despite everything, I was determined to make this a special day for Lucy and the baby. I had spent weeks planning and picking out what I thought were perfect gifts, soft blankets, cute baby outfits, and even a handmade quilt I'd spent nights sewing. George, do you think she'll like what I picked out? I asked while packing the car with the gifts. I couldn't help but worry after everything that had happened. George, always trying to keep the peace, gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Ellie, anyone would be lucky to get your gifts. They're from the heart. Don't fret. We arrived early to help set up. The venue was a pretty little hall decked out with balloons and banners proclaiming, "It's a boy." Michael greeted us at the door, his face lighting up when he saw the pile of gifts we brought in. Lucy was already there, fluttering around and directing decorations with a few of her friends. She seemed in good spirits, which eased some of my tension. Hi Lucy, need a hand with anything? I offered, hoping to break the ice a little. She glanced over, a quick once-over that didn't quite hide her impatience. No, thanks, Eleanor. We've got it all under control. Just enjoy the party, she said, a bit dismissively. Finally, the time came. Lucy sat down, a mountain of gifts around her, and the room quieted down. She started with ours, probably out of courtesy since we were the grandparents. She unwrapped the first package, pulling out the handmade quilt. I held my breath, watching her face for any sign of approval. Oh, this is quaint. Thanks, Eleanor, she said, the word quaint hanging awkwardly in the air. The room was silent for a moment, then filled with polite applause. My heart sank a bit, but I kept my smile. You're welcome, dear. I made it myself, thought the baby might like it. The next gift from us was opened, a set of baby clothes. Lucy's reaction was more of the same. Cute, she said flatly, barely glancing at them before setting them aside. By the time she got to the last one, the blankets, my hopes weren't high. Oh, more homemade stuff. Right, thanks. Her words stung, and I felt my cheeks burn. Then, as if the disappointment wasn't enough, Lucy held up the blanket, making sure everyone could see, and announced loudly, Eleanor clearly has no taste at all. Next time, just give me the money to buy something nice. The room fell silent, and I felt every eye on me. The embarrassment burned hotter than a summer's day. I stood there, rooted to the spot, not sure how to respond. George was at my side in an instant, his arm around my shoulders. Let's not let this spoil the day, he whispered, though I could hear the anger in his voice. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Right, let's just get through this. As the party continued, I felt like a ghost, barely there. Michael came over later, looking embarrassed. Mom, I'm really sorry about that. Lucy's, well, she's got her own way of doing things. I forced a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. It's okay, Michael. Let's just focus on the baby. Even with all the tension, I kept going back to Michael and Lucy's apartment to help out. I couldn't just sit back knowing they might need me, even if every visit was harder than the last. It was one of those mornings when I brought back a heap of laundry, freshly washed and dried, ready to be put away. I was folding and sorting everything into the right drawers, trying to make things a bit easier for them. As I was tucking away the last of Lucy's blouses into her drawer, I didn't hear her come in. The door slammed, making me jump, and there she was, staring at me like I'd just robbed a bank. What the hell, Eleanor? You think you can just dig through my things like it's nothing? Her voice was sharp, and her eyes were blazing. I put the blouse down slowly, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Lucy, I was just putting away the laundry. I thought I was helping. Helping? By snooping around my personal stuff? That's not helping, that's crossing the line. She was shouting now, and I could hear the anger boiling over. I tried to keep calm, though it was getting harder. I wasn't snooping, Lucy. I swear. I do this all the time. I just thought. Well, you thought wrong. Stay out of my things, got it? She cut me off, her words slicing through the little piece we had left. I backed off after that. But seeing how she lived started to eat at me. She'd stopped working, spent her days on the couch watching TV shows or shopping online for all sorts of things. One day, curious and a bit concerned, I asked, Lucy, how are you affording all these new things? She didn't even pause her scrolling. Michael's doing really well, selling lots of his paintings online. We're fine, Eleanor. That's good to hear, but maybe think about saving some of that. For the baby's education or something? Lucy laughed, a harsh sound that filled the room. His education? Please, that's your family's issue. Michael's making good money because he's talented, not because of anything else. You guys owe me, big time, especially since I'm carrying your heir. Walking out of there that day, I felt heavier than I had in a long time. The drive home was a blur of green lights and honking cars, but I couldn't shake Lucy's words. When I got home, George could tell something was wrong. What happened, Ellie? He asked, concerned. I shook my head, weary to the bone. It's Lucy. She thinks we owe her for having the baby. Like it's some kind of business transaction. George's face hardened, and he took my hand. That's nonsense, Ellie. You know that, right? We don't owe her anything. I nodded, trying to muster a smile. I know, but it doesn't feel great hearing that from your daughter-in-law. After the baby was born, I thought maybe things would start to look up, that maybe Lucy would settle into motherhood once she held her son. But it just didn't turn out that way. Lucy seemed more irritable than ever and didn't bother hiding it from anyone, not even me. One morning, not long after the baby came home, Lucy showed up at my doorstep, unannounced, with the baby in his carrier. Eleanor, I need to catch up on some sleep. Can you watch him today? Maybe your place is quieter, she said, her voice edged with exhaustion. I was worried but agreed. Of course, Lucy. Go get some rest. We'll be fine here. I thought maybe it was just new mother fatigue, but it became a pattern. Lucy would drop off her son at the slightest excuse, saying she needed to meet friends or just to have some me time. And when she was with him, it was as if she couldn't bear the responsibility. More than once, I arrived at their apartment to find the baby crying in the next room while Lucy lay on the couch, absorbed in some show, completely tuning him out. One day, the reality of the situation hit me harder than ever. I walked in as usual and heard the baby crying. I hurried to his room and what I saw stopped me dead. Lucy, standing over the crib, her face contorted in anger, slapped the baby. He wailed louder, and my heart broke. I rushed in and scooped him up, glaring at Lucy. What are you doing? You can't treat a baby like that. Lucy sneered at me. Oh, please. It was just a light tap. He needs to learn to stop crying over nothing. That night, I talked to George and Michael, my voice thick with worry. We need to do something. This isn't normal behavior. Lucy might be struggling with something serious. Michael looked defeated, the lines deepening around his eyes. I know, Mom. I thought it was just stress, but this is too much. We decided together that Lucy needed professional help. We even found a psychologist and made an appointment, but Lucy refused to go. She claimed she was perfectly healthy and accused me of trying to turn Michael and the family against her. It's nothing personal, Lucy. I tried to explain one last time over the phone. We're worried about you, and we just want what's best for you and the baby. Her voice was cold, clipped. I told you, I'm fine. This is just you, Eleanor, always finding fault where there is none. You can't stand that I don't need your constant meddling. I was at a loss, feeling more alone in this fight than ever. I hung up the phone, my heart heavy. How do you help someone who doesn't want to be helped? How do you protect a child from his own mother's indifference? I needed to have a serious talk with Lucy. I knew it wasn't going to be an easy talk. After everything that had happened, things had reached a boiling point. I took a deep breath, prepared my phone to record the conversation, not to spy, but just in case I needed to remember what was said, or if things took a turn for the worse. Lucy, we need to have a serious talk. I started, my voice steady. It's about your responsibility as a mother and how you're handling things. Lucy rolled her eyes, clearly not in the mood. Here we go again. What now, Eleanor? You going to lecture me on how to be a mom? It's not just about being a mom. It's about what's right for the baby. You can't keep threatening to cut us off from him every time something doesn't go your way, I said, trying to keep the frustration from my voice. That's when she snapped. Oh, so it's like that, huh? You think you can just come here and tell me how to live my life? How about I just don't let you see him at all? How would you like that? Her words were sharp, and she pulled out her phone, dialing Michael. With tears in her voice, she began, Michael, you need to hear this. Your mother just hit me and she tried to take your son away from me. My heart stopped. Lucy, that's not true. Why are you saying that? She ignored me, continuing her tearful tale to Michael. You need to do something, or me and the baby are leaving. You need to choose, Michael. It's me and your son or them. I was in shock, barely processing what was happening as I heard Michael's confused voice trying to calm things down, suggesting they talk later. Lucy hung up, a smug look on her face. See? You'll never see them again if you don't do what I say. Give me $100,000, or it's over. I was stunned into silence. This wasn't just a threat, it was outright blackmail. Before I could gather my thoughts, the baby started crying from the other room. Instead of tending to him, Lucy shouted at him to shut up and refused to change his diaper. That was it. The last straw. I couldn't take it anymore. This is wrong, Lucy. You can't do this. It's not right, I said, my voice quivering with anger and despair. Oh, just shut up and leave if you don't want to help, she snapped back. I left the apartment, my heart breaking with every step. What had just happened? How had things gotten so out of control? That evening, the phone rang. It was Michael, his voice heavy with sadness. Mom, I'm so sorry, but Lucy's made up her mind. She says it's best if you don't come around anymore. I don't know what else to do. In the background, I could hear Lucy's angry shouts, declaring they were cutting all ties with us. It felt like a nightmare. I hung up the phone, numb. If that's what they wanted, then maybe it was best to let them see the reality of their decisions on their own. I told myself that I had done everything I could. From that day, I stopped all financial support. No more paying for their apartment, no more money for groceries or baby care. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, but I needed them to face the consequences of their actions without us to fall back on. 2 months of silence had passed before Michael and Lucy unexpectedly showed up at my doorstep. The look on their faces was grim, and Lucy didn't waste any time. As soon as I opened the door, she demanded, "You need to start paying the apartment rent again. Michael's paintings aren't selling, and we're in trouble." Once we were all seated, with George beside me for support, I addressed them both firmly. We're not going to continue paying for your apartment. You both decided to cut ties, remember? Lucy looked shocked, perhaps not expecting this stance. Michael's eyes were downcast, he seemed embarrassed. And there's more, I continued, feeling a mix of anger and relief at finally speaking my mind. I've been managing the online sales of Michael's paintings. I'm stopping that as well. It's time for you both to take full responsibility." Lucy's face hardened. "You can't do this to us. We have nothing without your help." "That was your choice when you decided to push us away," I replied. "Also, I'm going to seek legal advice about the custody of my grandson. Your behavior has been completely out of line, Lucy." That's when I turned on the recording on my phone that captured one of our last conversations, where Lucy had demanded $100,000 from me. I played it aloud. George and Michael listened, horror growing on Michael's face as the reality of Lucy's actions sank in. After the recording ended, Michael finally looked up, his decision clear. "Lucy, this is over. I want a divorce. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to live under the same roof with someone who treats my family like this." She stormed out, cursing as she went, standing in the rain in the parking lot, yelling back at us. It was a heartbreaking scene, but there was also a sense of justice in seeing her true colors revealed so clearly. In the following weeks, Michael followed through with the divorce and took steps to ensure his son's safety. Lucy was eventually deprived of her parental rights due to her unstable behavior, and she moved to another city. Once the dust had settled, I invited Michael and my grandson to move back in with us. Our home became a place of healing and new beginnings. Michael soon organized an exhibition at a private art gallery. To everyone's delight, it was a tremendous success. His art, reflecting deep emotions and a journey through personal turmoil, resonated with many. Now, our home is filled with laughter and the joyous noise of my grandson playing. I spend every possible moment with my grandson, teaching him, loving him, ensuring he feels the security that was momentarily threatened. I'm Jennifer. Today was supposed to be a throwback to simpler times, hanging out at the amusement park with my bestie, Rachel. We were all about reliving those carefree childhood moments, scoffing down cotton candy, and screaming our heads off on roller coasters. As we stood in line for the Ferris wheel, a little boy in front of us was bouncing around, barely able to contain his excitement. He was with this guy, around my age, trying to keep the kid from darting off into the crowd. "Liam, buddy, stay close, okay?" the guy said, his voice calm but firm. The kid, Liam, nodded, but his attention was all over the place. I couldn't help but smile. The scene was too familiar, reminding me of outings with my younger cousins. Rachel nudged me, whispering, "Hey, he's kinda cute, don't you think?" I shrugged, trying not to look too interested. "Who? The kid or the guy?" "Very funny. The guy, obviously." We got on the Ferris wheel, and as fate would have it, those two ended up in the compartment next to us. From up high, with the world shrinking away, the guy and I exchanged smiles. He had this easy, open face that made you trust him right away. Once we were back on solid ground, Rachel, ever the wingman, dragged me towards them under the guise of helping Liam find his dropped toy car near the exit. "Thanks for helping out," the guy said as we handed the toy back to Liam. "No problem. He's your son?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He chuckled. "Nephew. I'm Jake, by the way, and this whirlwind is Liam." "Jennifer," I said, shaking his hand. "And the lifesaver over there is Rachel." Rachel waved, and Liam tugged on Jake's shirt, asking for ice cream. Jake looked at us, a bit hesitant, then made an offer. "How about we all grab some ice cream together? My treat." "Only if we get the biggest cones." Rachel jumped in, and we all laughed, making our way to the nearest ice cream stand. As Jake managed Liam's hyper-energetic ice cream requests, I saw a different side to him. He was patient, kind, and surprisingly easy to talk to. We started chatting about random things, favorite movies, worst amusement park rides, and how neither of us can stand clowns. "So, you come here often?" Jake asked, his tone teasing. "Only when I feel nostalgic or when someone drags me out," I replied, nudging Rachel who was busy demolishing her double scoop. We spent the rest of the day together, wandering from ride to ride, sharing stories and laughs. As the park lights began to glow against the dusk, Jake pulled out his phone. "Can I get your number?" I'd love to do this again, maybe without the wild rides and sugar highs next time. I felt a warm flush of excitement as I typed my number into his phone. Sure, that sounds great. He grinned. Great. I'll call you. And he did. The very next day. After Jake called, things between us moved pretty fast, like we were both sure this was it. The dates turned into weekends together, and those weekends turned into an easy routine of just knowing where each other fit. Before we even realized it, we were talking about forever. The day Jake proposed was as simple and beautiful as everything else with him had been. No dramatic gestures, just us on a quiet evening walk. Jennifer, he started, stopping mid-path and looking a bit nervous, which wasn't like him at all. I'd been thinking a lot about us. Yeah? I asked, feeling my heart start to race a bit. I don't want to scare you off or anything, but I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? He pulled out a ring, not flashy, but perfect. My heart skipped. Of course, I will, you goof. I thought you'd never ask. The wedding was small, just close friends and family. His parents, Mike and Susan, were everything you'd hope for. Warm, welcoming, they made me feel like I'd been part of the family for years. Susan hugged me tight the first time we met, whispering, "We're so glad he found you." But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Jake's sister, Sarah, was a different story. She was polite enough at the wedding, but I could feel the chill off her. She didn't make it easy, always keeping a bit of distance, her words polite but cold. A few months into the marriage, during a Sunday dinner at Jake's parents' house, I tried to break the ice with her. "Sarah, I was thinking maybe we could go shopping sometime, get to know each other better?" She looked up, a bit surprised, then masked it with a polite smile. "Maybe. We'll see. I'm pretty busy these days." Her husband, Tom, chimed in with a chuckle. "Busy? Babe, you spend more time at the gym than you do at home." Sarah shot him a look that could curdle milk. Some of us care about staying healthy. Life after the wedding felt like it was on fast forward. Me and Jake, we were solid, and soon enough, we got the news that would change everything. I was pregnant. The excitement, it was something else. We were gonna have a baby, our own little family expanding. "Jake, are you ready to be a dad?" I joked one night as we sat on the couch, my feet in his lap while he read some or other manual on baby stuff. "Are you kidding? I was born ready. This kid's gonna have the best dad ever." He shot back with a grin. "Yeah, right. Just wait till it's your turn for diaper duty at 3 a.m., I teased. When Johnny was born, it was like a piece of the universe just clicked into place. He was perfect, you know? All those cliches about parents falling in love the moment they see their baby, they're all true. But life, it doesn't always play fair. Johnny was 8 when we got the kind of news that just floors you. Leukemia. It hit us like a freight train. Everything else stopped. Nothing else mattered but getting our boy through this. Jake was a rock, but I could see the strain on him, same as it was eating at me. We spent more time in hospitals than at home. Treatments, tests, more treatments. It was a whirlwind that didn't seem to end. One day, coming back from the hospital, Jake just broke down in the car. "Jennifer, this is killing me. Seeing him like this, it's too much." I grabbed his hand, squeezed it hard. "We'll get through it, babe. We have to. For Johnny." But it was tough. The disease, it's a monster. It'd retreat a bit, give us a glimmer of hope, then come roaring back. And Johnny, that poor kid, he never complained, not once. Kept talking about getting a puppy one day, when he got better. "I'm gonna name him Rocket," he'd say with this little smile. "'Cause he'll be fast like a rocket." It broke my heart, every single day. And then, after a year of fighting, just when we thought we might be seeing a bit of light, it was over. Johnny passed away. After Johnny passed, the house was suffocating, filled with too many echoes of laughter and footsteps that would never sound again. The emptiness was a physical ache, a relentless pressure against my ribs. I spent days, then weeks, tangled in bed sheets, the world outside continuing without a hitch, and it seemed so wrong. Jake, he tried to reach me, his voice a lifeline thrown into the murky waters of my sorrow. "Jennifer, love, you gotta eat something," he'd say, his hand hesitant on the door, his silhouette a shadow against the light. "I'm not hungry," would be my muffled reply from the depths of our bed, the blankets over my head like a shroud. He'd sigh, the sound heavy with his own grief. "Okay, but I'm here, alright? Whenever you're ready." But ready didn't seem like it was ever going to be part of my vocabulary again. How could I be ready to face a world that no longer had Johnny in it? One evening, he came home from work and found me sitting on the floor in Johnny's room, surrounded by his toys and books. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down next to me, his presence a steady warmth. "Jennifer, talk to me," he finally whispered, picking up a model airplane Johnny loved. "Please, babe." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "Why? It doesn't bring him back. Nothing does. He should be here, Jake. He should be playing and laughing and driving us crazy. Not this." Jake wrapped an arm around me, pulling me against him. I know. It's hell, Jennifer. But we're in this together, okay? You're not alone in this." Days turned into weeks, and I started to move again, robotically at first. The house needed cleaning, groceries needed buying, life's mundane rhythms waiting for no one, not even a grieving mother. Susan, Jake's mom, started dropping by, always with too much food and an abundance of kindness. "Jennifer, you need to keep your strength up," she'd coax, her voice gentle, pushing a plate of something homemade and hearty towards me. "I'm really not hungry, Susan. But thank you." I'd manage, the food a lump in my throat. She never pushed too hard, just sat with me, her company a quiet reminder that the world hadn't completely forsaken me. "When you're ready to talk, I'm here. Until then, we eat or we sit, whichever you need." It was during one of those silent sit-downs when I found the words bubbling up, surprising even me. "He was supposed to outlive us, Susan. It's not right." Her eyes, so like Jake's, filled with tears. "No, it's not right. But it's what happened. All we can do now is live for him, make sure we remember the joy he brought us, not just the pain." "Feels like betraying him, moving on," I admitted, the guilt a chokehold. "It's not betraying him, Jennifer. It's honoring him. You think he'd want his mom this way, stuck and suffering? He'd want you smiling, laughing." "Hard to imagine laughing ever again," I mumbled, the very thought of joy a betrayal in itself. She squeezed my hand. "Maybe not today, or tomorrow. But you will, one day. And it'll feel like Johnny is laughing with you." Gradually, her words, Jake's unwavering support, they started to make a dent. The grief was still there, a vast ocean, but now I had boats in the form of family and friends, keeping me afloat, steering me towards a horizon that promised some semblance of peace. I started stepping outside, the sunlight harsh after so long in the dark. I returned to work, the routine a scaffold, holding me up, giving structure to days that otherwise blurred into one another. One afternoon, Jake found me in the garden, my hands deep in the earth, planting. "Look at you," he said, a small smile breaking through. "Never thought I'd see the day." "Me neither," I replied, looking up at him through strands of hair matted to my forehead. "But here I am." "Yeah, here you are," he echoed, kneeling next to me, his hand over mine in the dirt. "Together, always, right?" "Right," I nodded, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, we could make it through. It had been a year since we'd lost Johnny. Jake and I were slowly finding our footing again, and somehow, life seemed to inch back towards a semblance of normality. One Sunday, his parents invited us over for a family dinner. It was supposed to be a regular gathering, or so I thought. We arrived at Mike and Susan's place around 6 p.m. Dinner was lively, with all the usual banter and the familiar, comforting smell of Susan's cooking. That's until Sarah and her husband Tom arrived. "Jennifer, Jake, how's everything?" Sarah asked as they walked in, her voice never quite reaching warm. "We're getting by," Jake replied, giving me a quick squeeze on the shoulder. We all sat down to eat, the table laden with dishes that made my stomach growl, despite the undercurrent of tension. It was during dessert that things took a turn. Sarah, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly put her fork down with a clink that drew everyone's attention. "So, I've been thinking," she started, her eyes darting around the table, settling on me. Now that Johnny is gone, what are you planning to do with his education fund?" The room went still. I felt Jake stiffen beside me, and Susan's eyes widened in shock. "What did you just say?" Jake's voice was low, dangerous. Sarah, unfazed, continued, "The money Grandma set aside for Johnny. He won't need it, obviously. It could really help Liam with college next year." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My face felt hot, my palms sweaty. "Are you seriously asking this now, Sarah?" "Well, why not? It's practical. Money sitting there doing nothing doesn't help anyone, Jennifer." Jake was seething now. "It's our money, Sarah. Grandma gave it to Johnny, which means it stays with us. End of story." "But he's dead, Jake." Sarah's voice rose, sharp and cold. "Why keep money for someone who's not here?" "That's enough," Mike interjected, his voice stern. "You're out of line, Sarah." Tom tried to touch Sarah's arm, but she shook him off. "What? We're all thinking it. I'm just the only one saying it out loud." "No, you're the only one thinking it," I shot back, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's not just money, Sarah. It's the last thing his grandmother gave him, a part of her love for him. Love doesn't pay college fees, Jennifer. Be sensible." Sarah snapped back. Jake slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. "My sister or not, you're talking about my son. Our son. Show some damn respect." Tom finally spoke up, trying to calm the waters. "Maybe we should discuss this some other time, not at the dinner table." Sarah scoffed, pushing her chair back. "Whatever. When you all come back to the real world, let me know. Until then, enjoy living in your fantasy where money grows on trees." She stormed out, with Tom following her, casting apologetic glances our way. There was a heavy silence after they left. Susan got up, her hands shaking as she started clearing the table. "I'm so sorry, Jennifer. I don't know what's gotten into her." I shook my head, feeling numb. "It's not your fault, Susan. I just can't believe she'd say that. Not now. Not about this." We said our goodbyes, and the drive home was quiet. I leaned my head against the window, the streetlights blurring past. It was one thing to deal with the loss of Johnny, but facing such coldness from Sarah was a different kind of pain. How could family, blood, be so cruel? After Sarah's brazen proposal at dinner, I was livid, but once I cooled down, my mind started racing. Jake's grandma had given a similar amount to Sarah for Liam's education. So, where was that money? Curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself scrolling through Sarah's social media late one evening. The more I clicked, the clearer the picture became. There were Sarah, grinning in designer dresses, flaunting new jewelry, all dating back to around the time we lost Johnny. It was like a punch to the gut. "Jake, come look at this," I called out, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice as I flipped through Sarah's posts on my laptop. Jake peered over my shoulder, his brow furrowing. When did she start living like this? Right after Johnny, after we lost him, I muttered, the timeline too perfect to be a coincidence. I couldn't let it go. The next day, I called Melissa, a friend who often got caught in the middle of family drama, hoping she could shed some light. We met at a little diner where nobody would bother us. "So, have you noticed Sarah's spending spree?" I prodded, trying to sound casual. Melissa stirred her coffee, looking uncomfortable. "Yeah, it's hard not to. But did you know? Right after your boy, passed away, she seemed really happy. Said she came into some money. Happy? My voice cracked. Melissa, that money was supposed to be for Liam's college. Melissa bit her lip, glancing around before leaning in closer. Jennifer, I shouldn't say this, but she blew through Liam's college fund. Bought herself all sorts of stuff. She figured you'd end up giving her the money Johnny didn't get to use. I went straight home and told Jake everything. Watching his face cloud with anger and disbelief, I knew this was going to blow up. We need to tell my parents, he said decisively. Now. We drove to his folks' house, and Jake laid it all out for Mike and Susan, who listened in stunned silence. This is serious, Mom, Dad. Sarah spent Liam's education fund on herself and planned to claim Johnny's after. Jake's voice trailed off, choked with emotion. Susan covered her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. Oh, my God. How could she? We need to confront her, Mike said sternly, a hardness in his eyes I'd rarely seen before. Half an hour after we got home after talking to Jake's parents about the money, Sarah showed up at our door, her face twisted in rage. Before I could even greet her, she barged past me into the living room. You've got some nerve, Jennifer. She spat, her eyes wild. Accusing me in front of everyone. You think you're so perfect? Sarah, you need to leave. Now, Jake said firmly, stepping between us. She ignored him, her voice rising. I had every right to that money. It was just sitting there, and I spent it on myself, and now my boy needs money for college. It's not like your son. She paused, her lips curling into a sneer. It's not like he needs it anymore. I felt a cold fire ignite in my chest. How dare you? I hissed, my hands balling into fists. You speak about my son, about his memory, with such disrespect? Jake grabbed her arm, pulling her towards the door. Get out, Sarah. I won't warn you again. But she yanked her arm free, standing her ground. You'll regret this, both of you. I'll make sure of it, she promised with a venomous look. Without another word, Jake pushed her out and slammed the door shut, locking it. We both stood there, breathing heavily, hearts pounding in the silence that followed. The dreadful moment came just a few days later, the day that would have been Johnny's birthday. I went alone to his grave to lay some flowers and spend some quiet moments, but what I found there stopped me in my tracks. Johnny's grave was desecrated, the flowers trampled, the small mementos we'd left smashed and scattered. I fell to my knees, sobs wrenching from my throat, a raw, hollow pain tearing through me. When Jake and his parents found out, they were devastated. Jake held me close as I told them, his arms tight around me, his own grief mingled with mine. Who could do such a thing? Susan whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. The answer came sooner than we expected. The police reviewed the cemetery's surveillance footage and found that it was Sarah who had vandalized Johnny's grave. Tom, Sarah's husband, was furious when he heard what she'd done. He told us he was filing for divorce, unable to stomach her cruelty any longer. I can't be married to someone capable of this. I'm sorry for everything, he said, looking broken. The breach was too great, the act too vile. From that day, none of us spoke to Sarah again. Life after everything that happened with Sarah was like walking out of a long, dark tunnel into the light. Me and Jake, we were exhausted but together, trying to piece back a normal life from the shattered bits of the past months. One cool morning, I was sipping my coffee, staring out the kitchen window, when Jake came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. You okay, babe? He asked, his voice low and concerned. I leaned back into his chest. Yeah, just thinking. It's been a hell of a year, hasn't it? That's when I felt it, a tiny flutter in my belly. I'd been keeping a little secret, unsure of the right moment to share it, but now it felt right. Jake, I've got something to tell you. I'm pregnant, I said, the words lifting some of the heaviness that had settled around us. Jake's reaction was instant. His eyes widened, then he broke into the biggest grin I'd seen in months. Really? For real? Yeah, for real, I laughed, the sound bright in the quiet morning. He lifted me off the ground, spinning me around, before setting me down and pulling me into a fierce hug. "This is the best news, Jen. We're gonna have a baby." As the news settled in, we started planning. The spare room would need to be turned into a nursery, and there were a million things to buy and prepare. But more than the logistics, we talked about how we wanted to raise our new child, how we wanted to be his parents. "We'll do it right," Jake said one evening as we looked through baby books. "Teach him or her everything Johnny taught us." The pregnancy wasn't just a new beginning for us, it brought a new energy to everyone around us. Susan and Mike were over the moon, their excitement a balm on the still tender wounds left by Sarah's actions. "Another grandchild to spoil," Susan would say, her eyes twinkling. "And this one's gonna have the best guardians." Even Tom, who had been through his own storm, found solace in the joy of our growing family. "It's a fresh start for all of us," he said one afternoon as he helped Jake fix up the nursery. "Yeah, it is," Jake agreed, hammering away at a piece of stubborn furniture. "We're putting the past behind us, for good." And we did just that. As my belly grew, so did our hope and our resolve to build a family filled with love and devoid of the shadows that had plagued us. When our daughter, Lily, was born, it felt like the first truly clear day after a relentless storm. Holding her in my arms, looking into her curious, bright eyes, I felt a peace I hadn't known in a long time. "Welcome to the world, Lily," I whispered, her tiny hand gripping my finger. "It's not perfect, but it's beautiful, and it's yours." Jake, standing beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, looked down at Lily and then at me. "We did it, Jen. We're really doing it." "Yeah." I smiled up at him, my heart full. "We really are." As I watched Lily sleeping peacefully that night, a thought crossed my mind, linking the past with our future. "One day, when you're a little bigger, I'll get you a puppy, just like your brother Johnny dreamed of," I whispered to her. "We'll call him Rocket, fast and free, just like his dreams." In that moment, it felt like the circle was completing, a new chapter beginning with a nod to what we'd cherished and lost.